Stay with us. 3:30, and this is MPR News. I'm Tom Cran, here with Angela Davis and Reham Fashir. Special coverage of a verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder trial. We are going to bring you that verdict live on the air. Judge Peter Cahill has allowed cameras and audio in the court for this trial, somewhat unusual. So when the verdict is read, we'll be able to bring you the live audio of that verdict. The jury has reached a verdict in the trial. We were notified just about an hour ago, and the decision will be read in open court now in the next half hour between now and 4 p.m. Chauvin charged with murder and manslaughter in the killing last May of George Floyd. If the jury finds Chauvin guilty, he would be the second police officer in Minnesota to be convicted of killing a civilian while on duty. So just to bring you up to date, that's where we stand. About 11 hours, a little less, of deliberation. 4 hours last night after the jury got the case just before 4 p.m., and they were at it again at 8 this morning until a little after 2 this afternoon. There is great interest, we don't have to say, in this trial. Great interest certainly from media nationally and internationally. And Angela Davis, what are you seeing there about who has gathered here outside the courtroom in downtown Minneapolis?
Yeah, I'm monitoring social media and just seeing how they're reacting to the news that there is a verdict. And we're seeing people talking about, just this feeling of anxiety and worry. Quentin on Twitter just tweeted, "I have the same feeling in my stomach that I feel when the police get behind me while I'm driving." Kim tweets that she's at George Floyd Square outside of Cup Foods, and that it's filling up with people. There are smells of incense. There's a table set up with food, and a speaker now is calling on people of faith and calling for people of faith to step up and talk, and says that someone is saying there's no way God would let this man die in vain. And we're also, I mentioned earlier, people are talking about leaving downtown, trying to, leave the area. Lizzie writes, anyone who wants or needs to evacuate, I can fit up to 3 people in my back seat. Just let me know. We'll figure it out. So folks are, I think, trying to position themselves to hear this news. And again, just, full of a lot of anxiety, Tom.
And also position themselves, as you said, with family members and loved ones as well. I'm hearing you and I both from people we know who have picked up their kids, or they want to make sure that they're all together when this verdict is announced. And the crowd is building in downtown Minneapolis, outside the Hennepin County Government Center. We still don't see anyone in court yet. The tight shot of the Great Seal of the state of Minnesota, which is what we have seen from the pool feed throughout the trial when there is a break in the proceedings. Reham Fashir is with us as well, who, in addition to covering this trial, has covered the trials of Mohammed Noor and Geronimo Yanez as well, shooting death trials for, in one case, Minneapolis police, and another case, the killing of Philando Castile as well. So, Reham, let me ask you, what strikes you, what is different right now about this moment that we have been in before in these trials?
Well, as we all know, this was very well documented. This case, we have more than 9 minutes of video footage that captured former officer Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck, and that was the key evidence in this case that the prosecution really relied on to present their arguments that Chauvin was not justified in kneeling in the way that he did and causing the death of George Floyd. So that's the most striking fact about this case, is that this video evidence, and it's closely watched around the world. The other cases were also high profile, but as you remember in the Mohammed Noor trial, we didn't have any footage of the actual shooting.
Right.
We had footage of the aftermath and the chaos that ensued afterwards, but we didn't have any of the same type of video evidence that we have in this case. And in Yanez's trial, we watched really graphic video of dash cam video that captured the shooting.
Right.
But in those cases, what's different about this case is that you have a lot of different video evidence from different perspectives, different angles. In that case, I remember just one perspective and not as many perspectives as we're seeing here. And there are also differences in terms of the length of time and the split-second decisions that other officers maybe were forced to make in their perspective compared to officers in this case.
Mm-hmm. Also, we should talk about the trial itself. The prosecution introduced 38 witnesses over 11 days. The defense, some 7 witnesses over 2 days. Then yesterday, we also got a day's worth of closing arguments and then rebuttal to those closing arguments as well.
Right. Yeah, the prosecution took a long time going through evidence, starting with very emotional bystander testimony that we heard early on in the trial. So we heard from a number of bystanders who expressed feelings of helplessness and just being unable to help George Floyd as they, sat back and watched what was happening. So that was really strong testimony that the prosecution started off with, and then they kind of went into the technical aspects of the trial in terms of evidence and forensics and the things like that you expect in a murder trial. And then we heard from expert witnesses, multiple expert witnesses. They had, I believe, about 5 medical experts who testified that George Floyd died from positional asphyxia, from lack of oxygen due to the knee on the neck, while the defense, I believe, only had 1 medical witness and 1 use of force expert. So there is that disparity there, but that's to be expected because the state does have the burden of proof.
Right.
Chauvin's attorney in the beginning of the trial did say that he doesn't have to prove anything. He's coming into this with the presumption of innocence.
Right.
Yeah.
Reham Fashir reporting on the trial for us. Angela Davis here with me, and I'm Tom Cran, NPR News. If you're just tuning in, know that we expect the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial to be read in court any minute now, sometime between now and 4 o'clock, we were told. Was about an hour ago. They cleared the building, the Hennepin County Government Center, of any personnel who were not directly related to this trial. And now we're going to bring in Mary Moriarty, former chief Hennepin County public defender who's been watching this trial very closely and commenting on it. And Mary, what are your thoughts right now as we wait for this verdict to be read in court?
There's a lot of apprehension on the part of people in the community. I'm downtown right now. I'm actually right across the government center.
Okay.
Yesterday, I had thought, after hearing the closing arguments in the trial, that this would be a relatively quick verdict. And by that, I thought it might be today.
Yeah.
Because I just think the evidence was fairly overwhelming, and the prosecution got some instructions that they asked for that were favorable to them, particularly on use of force. So I don't think this verdict is a surprise that it's this quickly, and I think the fact that it did come this quickly means that they have found him guilty.
All right. Tell us about that's 11 hours of deliberation. How would that work in the jury room, to the extent that any of us know? Take us inside there, and what would that what would it be? What would be going on last evening and then today during the day?
Well, people who've been watching this or following this have a sense of what they think. That they think Chauvin is guilty or not, but they didn't know until yesterday, and neither did the jury, what the exact instructions would be. In other words, what are the elements of this crime? What do the jurors have to find beyond a reasonable doubt to convict him? And so that's very different than watching everything and coming up with an opinion.
Yeah.
So yesterday, the judge instructed them on all 3 cases. He went all through each element. And so other than that, he told them to go back and select a 4-person. But other than that, judges don't give them any instructions. They get to do whatever they want to do. If they want to take an initial vote, they can do that. If they want to hear from all 12 of them, they can do that. If they want to tackle one issue like the causation, they can do that. So we don't know, and we may never know, although I suspect one or more of the jurors will tell us what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But it's totally up to the jurors to decide how to proceed. The state did, in closing argument, show them a document. It was a chart with all of the elements of the offense. The state suggested that they could use that to guide their closing arguments, but also said they didn't have to. So They may have used that as well.
I'm with Mary Moriarty here on NPR News as we await the reading of the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial any moment now in Hennepin County Court. So in a case like this, what has happened? The jury was sequestered, so they bring them all back together, and then who reads the verdict? The foreperson of the jury usually is called upon to read the verdict?
No. They will. Actually, it's kind of interesting. The jurors will walk into the courtroom, and one thing lawyers always do is look to see who has the piece of paper in their hand.
Okay.
That verdict form is held by the person who is the foreperson. Okay. And so that's the first time we really know who the foreperson is. The judge will ask them if they have reached a verdict. They will say yes. Then the judge's clerk probably will go over there and get the verdict form. And he or she will probably hand it to the judge. And I suspect in this kind of case, the judge will read the verdict out loud. At that point, if it's a guilty verdict, the defense can ask that the judge do what's called poll the jurors, which means the judge would go through each individual juror and say, is this your true and correct verdict? Mm-hmm. And each juror would have to say yes.
How often is that done?
Point, Oh, most of the time on a guilty verdict.
So we will likely be able to hear that happen.
Yes.
Yes.
And then the big issue is we know Chauvin is out on bail. So if he is convicted, will the judge take him into custody? That's completely up to the judge to decide that. But usually if somebody is convicted on a case that calls for prison by the guidelines, they are taken into custody. There are aggravating factors to consider. In other words, the state is asking for a sentence greater than the guidelines. Chauvin yesterday waived his right to have a jury make that decision, so the judge will do that. But the judge has already promised or told the lawyers that they will have some time to write memorandums to try to convince him what the appropriate sentence will be. So if there's a conviction, we will not be seeing a sentence today. Mm-hmm. That will probably take place in a couple of weeks or however much time the judge gives the lawyers to write their briefs.
Mary Moriarty, former chief Hennepin County public defender, with us about the workings in a courtroom when a jury is read and the proceedings, which we will hear live in just a moment. We'll talk to you again, Mary, after the verdict. But just quickly before we go here, tell us where are you right now and what's the scene like quickly?
I'm right across the street in the Capella building, and it's really hard to see because there's cardboard all around this and fencing and that sort of thing. You can see more people kind of coming in downtown, but I also know that the county had a plan that when the verdict came back, they were closing all the buildings and sending all employees home. So I imagine that there are quite a few county employees, or whichever county employees were here, are on their way home or have already left.
All right, Mary Moriarty, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you again once we know the verdict, once it has been read in court. Thank you for your insight, taking us inside the courtroom.
Thank you.
It's NPR News. Good afternoon. It is 3:44 on the 20th of April. And we have a verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial. The jury has reached a verdict. We're waiting it to be read in court any time now, and we're getting reaction from around the metro and around the city of Minneapolis. Our Matt Sepik is at George Floyd Square now, where people are gathering. Matt, tell us what the scene is there and how people will watch the verdict or hear it.
Well, I got here half hour. It was just a few dozen reporters, a few committee members get as well. Now the crowd has swelled to several hundred people intermingled with the TV cameras here. People gathered for a prayer around the memorial site just outside of Cup Foods here a few minutes ago, and we're listening to speeches and chanting of say his name and that sort of thing. The last few minutes, people are awaiting this verdict here, all looking at their phones.
Right. And have you talked to anyone there? Have you gotten any reaction from anyone who's there?
Well, I talked to a woman just a little bit ago from Maple Grove who came in and said that she thought that she really needed to be here at this historic moment. I could tell she was, definitely anxious about hearing the verdict, but she told me that an African-American woman that her grandparents had told her about stories of racism, and particularly at the police, and that this will be a turning point for change, and it's really a historic moment.
Well, let's go to that tape, Matt. We're having a little trouble hearing you on the line. Let's hear that tape.
The struggle's been real for many years, and we've been through a lot. I've listened to my grandparents, my parents, other people, my family, my aunts and uncles talk about the struggles and the racism that they've been through for many years, and then to actually be able to be a part of and experience what could be a wonderful change in the world is a great opportunity for myself. I was kind of leery about coming down at first, but I really wanted to be a part of this historical moment, so I thought I would just go ahead and come on down here.
That's someone Matt Sepik talked to earlier from Maple Grove at George Floyd Square. And Matt, we'll check in with you again. Thank you so much.
And I should say, Tom, that
yes.
Her name is Alicia Pruitt of
Thank you.
Maple Grove. I don't know that we introduced her properly.
No, I don't think,
but
I appreciate that, and I'm sure she does too.
No problem.
Alicia Pruitt of Maple Grove and her perspective on an important day at George Floyd Square where Matt Sepik is. 3:47, it's NPR News. If you're just tuning in, we know we have a verdict. We know the jury has reached one after less than 11 hours of deliberation, but we are waiting for that verdict to be read in open court. And when that happens, we will bring it to you live. We've got our eye on the court, and Angela Davis is here with me, and you've got your eye on a lot going on out there on social media. Yeah.
Right. Listening to Matt Sepik, I was looking at some of the photos that Matt posted on Twitter of people gathering there at George Floyd Square, and you're starting to see the crowd there getting larger, and you see all the flowers that have been there, over the last 10 months since this first occurred. People creating a memorial to George Floyd, and so people are flocking there to be there to hear this news. And we're also seeing folks post pictures of other places that they have chosen to go to as they hear the verdict. Kimberly wrote on Twitter, sitting in the hair salon waiting on this verdict because I needed to be in community for this. Beyond the black church and a family reunion, few things rival the beauty shop or barber shop for us when it comes to a soft place to land. Right, here we go. And she posted a photo. And then also one of my friends went out to the Hennepin County Courthouse, and she posted a photo. I just stumbled upon Reverend Jesse Jackson outside the back of the Hennepin County Courthouse. As we know, we've got international, national journalists here, as well as many civil rights leaders have been through Minnesota and are here now for the trial and for the verdict. And then folks are also talking about people who are alone. Pahua posted, I'm watching this on TV. Everyone is in the courtroom except for the judge and the jury. But I keep thinking about everyone I know, wishing I wasn't alone waiting for this verdict, sending you all love. And it all speaks to, Tom, what we've been talking about for weeks, just the concern and worry. And not just after the verdict, but how do we move forward, living our lives here in Minnesota, in community, and going about our daily lives and trying to figure out, what are the conversations we need to have so that we all feel safe.
Right. And the community taking care of itself and each other as well will be a big, I'm sure, part of the next few days, whatever the verdict is. We are going to get the perspective now of a professor at Mitchell Hamlin Law School and former vice president of the Minnesota Black Lawyers Association, Angie Porter. And as we await this verdict, Angie, thanks for joining us here on NPR News. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I'm wondering what is going through your mind right now at this moment. I imagine many things.
Absolutely. I mean, as an attorney and also as a Black person, I know that this verdict that we're about to hear is so incredibly important for Black people around the globe, for our ancestors, and for our children. And so there's a lot hinging on this. It may seem like just one case, but I think people in our community know that this is a culmination of a long litany of cases, known and unknown. And we'll get an answer about whether this justice system truly cares, whether the jury of our peers truly care about this heinous crime as a sort of a representative crime against our people.
Now, what do you make, in your legal opinion, of the jury coming back basically less than 24 hours after they got the verdict, after what, 11 hours, even less than that, of deliberation?
Yeah. Well, I would say it's relatively short, so we can take off the table that it's a hung jury or a deadlocked jury. I'm feeling pretty positive about the outcome. What I don't know is whether it'll be a conviction on all counts, but I'm feeling pretty positive having listened through voir dire, jury selection, and knowing that there are a couple of very strong jurors, in my opinion, who I do not believe would acquit Derek Chauvin. So because of that, I'm feeling pretty positive, and I'm hoping that the conviction will at least be toward second-degree murder, if not all counts.
Now, yesterday we had closing arguments, and really it was quite a long day. Closing arguments first from the prosecution, then the defense for more than 2 hours, and then an additional after a lunch break, and then the rebuttal. And what did you make of all of that? First, the prosecution's case and the closing arguments, and how important they are for a jury, since it's really the last stuff they hear, right?
Absolutely. I was very impressed with the state's closing arguments, particularly the initial closing argument by Steve Schlischer, which was about an hour and 45 minutes. I thought that Schlischer did a great job walking the jury exactly through the steps they should take as respect to each count. They displayed some great graphics to make this law very clear, and he really was acting like a teacher to help dispel any confusion that might have been raised by the defense. I thought that the defense closings by Eric Nelson were much too long, and at a point you just lose the attention of the jury, and when you stand between them and lunch, you sort of lose their respect, and I think it really hurt him to go on for that long rather than being succinct and concise about the reason that there could be reasonable doubt in this case. And then, of course, Jerry Blackwell, I thought, did a marvelous job in the rebuttal. I do think rebuttal is pretty hard, so there were a couple of points that I believed could be stronger, but he was so brilliant just synchronizing all of that expert testimony, which he's very expert about. And a little tidbit, he's one of the co-founders of the Minnesota Association of Black Lawyers, so it's always great to see him in action. As a totality overall, I just think the state's case was much stronger from a legal standpoint, and they also have that emotional weight and sort of that righteous indignation on their side, which is an easier side to be on when you're faced with such a heinous crime.
And tell us how that works. The rebuttal. He obviously, Mr. Blackwell, had no. He didn't really know what what Eric Nelson was going to say, and he had to sort of rebut it in just it's not quite on the fly, but it almost is, right?
It is, and that's what makes it incredibly hard. So your rebuttal argument is limited to the scope of the fall into place. This has to go on the record, so we need court staff to be in place as well. So they're going to make sure they have everyone together and assembled, and we are the furthest thing from the court's mind right now. It's really those parties who are in the room.
Right, and it is really all about that. What do you make of Judge Cahill and the way he sort of ran the proceedings of the of the trial?
I think Judge Cahill sought to be very even-handed. As an attorney and as a Black attorney who also does some work in the discrimination and bias space, I did cringe at some moments where I noticed there might have been some racial bias going on in the proceedings. Whether it's implicit bias or otherwise, I can't say. But I definitely noticed, particularly when Jerry Blackwell was examining witnesses, and even during his rebuttal, objections were drawn more frequently for similar attorney conduct as his teammates. And those objections were also sustained. And so that's something I hope that the court examines in hindsight later on. Again, I don't believe it's necessarily intentional, but it's definitely something community members noticed. Yeah. I also think that Judge Cahill sought to eliminate any suggestion of race in this trial. Whether that was prudent or not, I think time will tell. But I do think it's a question that needs to be examined. One example that sticks out to me is when the witness Donald Williams sought to explain a comment that he made to another bystander about being a Black man and how this always happens to Black people, police brutality. And as soon as he opened his word to say Black man, there was an objection, and that objection was sustained. And I question whether that was legally sound and also prudent. So these are things I think should be a fair critique for both the court and the parties, and they should examine how race was handled in this trial and whether that was, in the long term, wise or fair.
We're talking with Angie Porter, professor at Mitchell Hamlin's School of Law and an attorney as well, as we approach 4 p.m. now here on MPR News. 4 o'clock, and I'll tell you what, we have a question from Reham Fashir. I understand we'll get to in just a second, if you could stay with us, Angie. But I want to check in with Angela Davis here as we wait. I just want to give a quick update on what we're waiting for. If you're just tuning in, is a verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial, said to be read in open court now in any moment. We were told between 3:30 and 4, and here we are at 4, and no verdict yet, no sign of people in the courtroom. But Angela Davis is here with me monitoring social media and what sort of reaction. There's so much attention on this trial. Yeah,
a lot of folks have their phones in their hands and they're sharing photos and video of where they have chosen to position themselves, where they've chosen to be while we wait for this verdict. And I should note that, a lot of people in cities other than Minneapolis, folks across the country, we're seeing gatherings. I'm seeing photos and video of people gathering at courthouses and public squares in other parts of the country and other cities, in Louisville and D.C. And so that is interesting. And I just want to note a lot of what I'm seeing too on social media, beyond people, trying to be in community, be around other people as they wait for the verdict. Folks are reminding one another about self-care. And so I'm seeing tweets that say, a loving reminder to do what you need to take care of yourself today. Disengage if you need to. Remember to breathe. Lean on your support system. Cry it out. Scream if you have to. All of it is valid. And someone else posted on Twitter, we are under collective tension. If you need to log off, do so. You will not miss the news. Be kind to yourself. This moment is heavy with pain and dread and held breath. And another person, Chris, tweeted, protect your peace today and every day. Folks have also, they've shared that they are very distracted, can't get things done. A teacher writes, I was supposed to be grading today. Clearly that's out of the window. And so, again, the photos and images that I'm seeing on social media, people are sharing, where they are, who they chose to be with. People are talking a lot about leaving downtown Minneapolis, driving, getting out, going to pick up their kids from schools. We know a lot of schools canceled their after-school activities scheduled scheduled for today. We know that Minneapolis Public Schools, ahead of all of this, decided that students would be in remote learning, exclusively on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, not knowing when the verdict was coming. So there is a lot of concern about safety. What will be the response, regardless of the verdict?
Right.
Will there be, a huge celebration? Will there be huge protests? Folks don't know, but there is a sense that, something, could happen, that someone might get hurt, which is unfortunate because no one wants that. No one wants that at all.
Right. Angela Davis, one more question about this morning, the program you did at 11 o'clock, and I heard some of it, and it was about how community leaders are dealing with this past year here, and certainly these past few weeks.
Right.
And what sort of, if you will, wisdom were you hearing either from the leaders or from the people who called about how they're managing to get through this?
Yeah, it's been impressive because a lot of faith leaders, community leaders, artists, writers, singers, everyone, they've chosen to go out into public places and try to get people together and connect and to talk about what they're feeling and seeing, because for, a lot of people of color, this is, we're at a breaking point. It's a crisis, but it's not new because they've had decades and generations of living with pain and trauma and racial injustice. And so this whole trial has been, part of a wound that has never been able to heal. And so you have people, feeling all kinds of ways because of their lived experiences. Some people, are just like, we don't understand why everyone is so upset, and other folks who can barely get out of the bed in the morning. But we're all living, working, and interacting with one another. So it's made the tension very difficult. But faith leaders have organized, because we are, let us not forget, living through a pandemic, right? We can't necessarily be together in the way that we want to be and hold each other's hands and hug each other or be together. A lot of virtual healing events and spaces are taking place, which, may sound a little strange, but people are tuning in, doing what they can to meditate, to have time of reflection and silence and try to get a hold of their emotions so that they can be ready to deal with whatever comes next and to be supportive of others.
All right, Angela Davis, I understand that.
All rise for the jury. All right, please be seated. Members of the jury, I understand you have a verdict. Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, Count 1. Court File Number 27, CR 20-12646. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, Juror Foreperson, Juror number 19. Same caption, verdict Count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by Jury Foreperson, Juror number 19. Same caption, verdict Count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Jury Foreperson 019. Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are your true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no. Juror number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 19, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 27, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 44, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 55, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 79, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 85, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 89, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 91, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 92, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Are these your verdicts, so say you one, so say you all?
Yes.
Members of the jury, I find that the verdicts as read reflect the will of the jury and will be filed accordingly. I have to thank you on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service, but heavy-duty jury service. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to follow the deputy back into your usual room, and I will join you in a few minutes to answer questions and to advise you further. So, all rise for the jury. All right, be seated. With the guilty verdicts returned, we're going to have Blakely, you may file a written argument as to Blakely factors within 1 week. The court will issue findings on the Blakely factors, the factual findings, 1 week after that. We'll order a PSI immediately returnable in 4 weeks. And we will also have a briefing on, after you get the PSI, 6 weeks from now, and then 8 weeks from now we will have sentencing. We'll get you the exact dates in a scheduling order. Is there a motion on behalf of the state?
Your Honor, the state would move to have the court revoke the defendant's bail and remand him into custody pending sentencing.
Bail is revoked, bond is discharged, and the defendant is remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff. Anything further?
Oh,
All right. Thank you. We're adjourned.
So, counsel, Gates, I can send you to me.
Unanimous, 3 guilty verdicts, guilty on all counts. Derek Chauvin, who has been remanded to custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff. There was also some talk there about the Blakely factor, and that has to do with the sentencing, and we'll get some legal perspective on that in just a moment or two. But you're listening to MPR News, and we want to go outside the court now. I understand our Tim Nelson is in downtown Minneapolis, outside the Hennepin County Court. And what is the reaction out there, Tim Nelson?
I think jubilant would be a good description here. It was eerie. There were thousands of people here standing on the plaza on the south side of the courthouse. It literally fell silent while the verdict was being read. Someone shouted guilty, and the crowd erupted. You can hear horns honking all over downtown. People are jumping up and down, waving signs, hugging each other, weeping. It's a very, very happy crowd. This is what they wanted. This is what they've been calling for hours out here.
And how many people would you say are gathered, Tim? How big is the crowd?
It's covering most of the south side of the plaza here, on the south side of the government center here. It's hard to tell. It's a big crowd. They're packed very tightly. I mean, there are thousands of people here. And I've been talking to people from Milwaukee, from Oregon, from Detroit, from Chicago, from Minneapolis, from St. Louis Park. I mean, it is literally the crossroads of the nation right now.
And we should say that what I didn't notice there, apparently right after Derek Chauvin was remanded to custody to the Hennepin County Sheriff, he was handcuffed and led out of the courtroom. And we're seeing the scene on television in downtown Minneapolis as well. Tim Nelson, stay there. We'll check in again, but I want to get some legal perspective now from Mark Ostler from the University of St. Thomas, law professor, listening to the verdicts. First of all, any surprise there in the 3 guilty verdicts for Derek Chauvin, Mark Ostler?
No, I think that's what most people expected, although people were hedging their bets about it because you're never sure with the jury. But at this point, a city, a state, a nation is finally able to breathe out, I think.
Mm-hmm. And tell us what just that one bit of business, the Blakely factor, we heard that referred to. And I said I would ask someone much more knowledgeable than me. It has to do with the sentencing and the enhanced sentencing, right?
That's right. If they want to enhance the sentencing, and the government gave notice long ago that they want to, it has to be premised on facts that the defendant has a right to have those facts be found by a jury. Now, at the end of the trial, Derek Chauvin waived the ability to have a jury hear those facts. So instead, the judge is going to determine whether or not those facts exist. If he finds that those facts exist, that allows him to go over the sentencing guidelines, which are going to be about 12 and a half years on the top charge.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask, so 12 and a half years on the top charge, and how does it work with the 3 guilty verdicts with sentencing? Are they consecutive or concurrent?
Well, the other ones drop away, so he'll just be sentenced on the top one.
Okay, and that's the way it works. And when can we expect that?
Well, the judge said it's going to, there's a process here that next week they're going to file briefs saying what they think the facts should be that are found and the impact that'll have, and that he'll make a decision a week after that on the enhancement. I believe he said that sentencing will be in 8 weeks. And so we've got a while to wait. Of course, in the interim, Derek Chauvin will be in jail.
Right. Now, leading up to this, once the case was handed over to Attorney General Keith Ellison, his sort of standard expectations were this is very hard to prove a case like this against a police officer. It's only the second time here in Minnesota, right, where the second police officer, Derek Chauvin, to be convicted of killing a civilian while on duty. We expect to hear from Keith Ellison, whose office prosecuted the case. So what do you make of that? Was that standard pretrial rhetoric, or is this, in fact, a pretty extraordinary conviction as you see it?
Well, we hope that this is an inflection point. This is something that is different and that police will be held accountable more readily going into the future. One of the things that Keith Ellison and the people working with him were able to do was break down that blue wall of silence, to have the police chief, Chief Arredondo, and other police officers say that this behavior was wrong, it wasn't consistent with training, and it was a crime. And that's something that we haven't seen in the past, and hopefully that we will see in the future going forward.
Mark Ostler, professor at the University of St. Thomas, law professor, thank you, as always, for your perspective through the trial and afterwards. Is there anything here that you think that we need to know about this and this case moving forward?
Well, one thing is that, we'll never find out probably what the discussions were in the jury room and what they said. But we did get a little interesting tidbit today, which is that we know who the jury foreperson was. And it was Juror 19, who is an auditor, a white man who's in his 30s. So this is someone who's used to process, who's used to deliberation. And it shouldn't surprise us that they apparently took their time, even though if they had a consensus at the start, they worked their way through the charges, and I expect that if we did find out what those discussions were, we would think that this is the way it should be.
Mark Ostler from University of St. Thomas, thank you very much, law professor there, shedding some light on this afternoon, 3 guilty verdicts for former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. He has been found guilty of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, second-degree manslaughter in the killing of George Floyd. The verdict just read less than 10 minutes ago or so in court. I'm Tom Cran, NPR News, and my colleague Angela Davis here with me as we continue our coverage here on NPR News. Angela is monitoring social media and a lot more when it comes to the reaction here and what sort of reaction after this buildup we you're talking about and the sense of the community on edge. What are you seeing so far?
You know, earlier we talked about everyone had their phones in their hands, so they were posting photos and video. It's gone a little bit quiet, but we're seeing people share famous quotes. I follow the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on Twitter, and Bernice King, she tweeted this: "Oh, I wish that George Floyd were still alive, but I am thankful for accountability. The work continues. Justice is a continuum, and America must bend with the moral arc of the universe, which bends towards justice." And that's a famous quote from Dr. King.
Yeah.
The moral arc of the universe bends toward justice. Someone else writes, "Our fight to end police brutality and systemic racism does not end with this guilty verdict, but at least for a moment we can relish in this small ray of hope." Jeffrey also says, "My heart goes out to Floyd's family and the Twin Cities. Rest in power, George." And another tweet, this is from Emmett. Emmett writes, "It starts with accountability for one action, a critical first step in a long, hard journey. Begun. Breathe. Hug your loved ones. Let's move forward together. Hashtag God bless." And, Tom, this is the next step in this, regardless of, what happens in that courtroom. Again, we as Minnesotans have to figure out what happens next.
Right.
What do we do next?
Yeah.
Because we will continue to find ourselves covering these trials and these verdicts, right? So how do we reverse this process?
Angela Davis here with me. I'm Tom Cran. It's NPR News. It's live special coverage this afternoon of the conviction of Derek Chauvin, found guilty on all three counts. Chauvin was charged in the killing of George Floyd, as you know, last May, and he was found guilty on second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Chauvin has been handcuffed and led out of the courtroom. The jury had the case for about 10 hours before it announced it had reached a verdict sometime after 2, and it was read in court not long ago, just within this half hour. I want to get back to Mary Moriarty as well, a former chief public defender for Hennepin County, who I must say, Mary Moriarty, you predicted how this would unfold uncannily, and I thank you for that. And, in the news, we say we're not in the prediction business. We're in the business of telling you what happens when it happens. But what convinced you? Was it the evidence or the time the jury deliberated that these would be guilty verdicts, as you predicted?
I think it's probably 31 years of trying cases and watching this case. I had the opportunity to watch it from beginning to end. I had an opportunity to watch all the cross-examinations, and the state's evidence was just overwhelming on the medical aspect, and the defense was really left arguing reasonable doubt, and that's usually not a very effective way or place to be. And so I assumed that the jurors would want to spend some time looking through the instructions and being very conscientious, but I thought that the jury would come back guilty on all counts today. I guess it was just a feeling of having done this work for so many years and just watching the case and seeing how it all unfolded.
I'll ask you the same question I asked Mark Osler about Keith Ellison, Attorney General, whose office prosecuted this, who repeatedly said before the trial that this would be a very hard conviction. And then are we at an inflection point here when it comes to accountability for police?
Well, I think the Attorney General was trying to manage people's expectations because in the past we haven't seen accountability. And I will say this is an incredibly important case, and it means everything to people here, although it is also just the first step in a long journey of reform. But this is a very different case. It is not that case where a police officer shot somebody and they argue that it was a split-second decision and they were frightened. This was a very different case because everybody saw that video and there was 9.5 minutes opportunity for Derek Chauvin to do something different. And so, yes, this is critically important, but it remains to be seen what other cases will look like. I will say Attorney General Ellison did assemble something like 12 lawyers, I think. They were able to get one of the finest experts I've ever seen testify. That was Dr. Tobin.
Dr. Tobin, right?
They had
pulmonologist,
Yes, they had an outstanding cardiologist. They covered all the bases. They had a toxicologist, 2 MEs, and the defense was unable to, find experts that could contradict what they said. So they did a very good job covering all of their bases. It remains to be seen whether that will be the standard. I've talked to journalists from all over the country who said they've never seen a case tried this comprehensively with police officers. So maybe this should be the new standard, but it remains to be seen.
Mary Moriarty with me here on NPR News after the verdict this afternoon on all 3 counts. Derek Chauvin found guilty of the murder of George Floyd. Now, our Reham Fashir, who's been covering this trial and has covered the Yanez trial and the Mohammed Nur trial as well, on the line with us this afternoon. And Mary, Reham has a question for you about the trial. Reham, go ahead.
Mary, I was just wondering what you think this outcome, how this outcome will affect the other 3 officers who are scheduled to face trial in August.
Yeah. Mary Moriarty, are you still there? Oh, we seem to have lost her. There are a lot of people trying to make connections through their cell phones this afternoon. So we'll get back, Reham. Sorry about that we lost Mary. But stay with us. It's NPR News at 4:24. And right now, let's bring in Leslie Redmond, the former president of the Minneapolis branch of the NAACP, for some reaction this afternoon. Leslie Redmond, may I ask your reaction to these guilty verdicts this afternoon? All right. Leslie Redmond, are you there? If she's not there, I'll just, we will get back in touch with Leslie as well, and we will check in a little later on. Again, a lot of people connecting and trying to connect this afternoon. Let me just catch you up on where we are. It's NPR News. I'm Tom Cran. The jury has found the former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin guilty on all 3 counts: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Chauvin was charged in the killing last May of George Floyd. He has been handcuffed and led out of the courtroom not long ago in Minneapolis. So, Leslie Redmond, you are back, I understand, and can hear me. Leslie Redmond, can you hear me? Maybe Leslie can, but we can't hear her. Let's move on to our Matt Sepik, who is at George Floyd Square, 38th and Chicago in Minneapolis, where a crowd has gathered at the site of George Floyd's murder, we can say legally now, by Derek Chauvin. And a crowd has gathered there. And Matt Sepik, what are you seeing and hearing right now this afternoon at George Floyd Square?
It's quite the celebration here at 38th Street and Chicago Avenue. Hundreds of people are in the streets. They had been gathered here, I would say, at least for an hour before the verdict was read. I happen to be standing next to a man who brought a portable, amplified, battery-powered speaker that he connected to his cell phone, so I could hear Judge Peter Cahill read the jury's verdict out, and I could hear the crowd all around me erupting in cheers as that guilty verdict was read on each of those 3 counts. Talked to at least one person here in between phone calls and live hits on the radio who said that she's very happy to see that justice is being served because it's been something that has been denied so many African people for so many years in these types of cases. But and her name is Taisha Bryant from St. Paul. Told me that this is really just the beginning. There's so much more work to be done to ensure that things like this don't happen again. A guilty verdict is really just the first step in a long journey toward justice, she says.
And then tell me right now, Matt, what is the crowd like? Or before we get to that, I really want to know what it was like that moment. You say someone had a speaker. I wondered how people were either watching or listening. So someone had a speaker on their phone. At the moment the verdicts were announced, what was it like?
There was no Jumbotron down here to watch it. I would have thought that somebody would have brought a big screen or something, but that was not the case. It was really just kind of an organic gathering of people watching on their small screens, on their phones, watching Twitter. But somebody did have a thought to connect to the live stream and bring a speaker so more people could hear. And it was really quite an electric moment to hear the judge read out that verdict and hear the crowd's reaction. Just yards from the spot where George Floyd was murdered at the hands of Derek Chauvin 11 months ago.
Armad Sepik at George Floyd Square, which is at Chicago Avenue and 38th Street, the site of George Floyd's murder. And we're bringing you live coverage this afternoon here on MPR News. And we're going to rejoin now Leslie Redmond, whom we tried to speak to earlier about the three guilty verdicts of Derek Chauvin today, read in court not long ago. Leslie Redmond, former president of the Minneapolis branch of the NAACP, and I'm glad we can connect with you. I want to get your reaction to these guilty verdicts today.
Yes, grace and peace. I've actually been in front of the government center when I heard that they were going to be reading the verdict. I was very optimistic and very happy because the jury came back so early. I knew that we were, going to get some good news, and that was kind of the sentiment of everyone else who was down there. Everyone, people were bringing their wine, people were ready to celebrate, and then when the guilty verdicts were read, everybody just started screaming and yelling and very happy and celebrating.
And tell me what this means to you. What do you see this verdict when it comes to police accountability, and what does it is it path breaking in any way or pioneering in any way? 100%. Tell me more.
Definitely. Yes. So, law is based on precedent. And here in Minnesota, the only precedent we had was Officer Noor, a black Somali Muslim man kill a white woman, Justine Damon, right? And so Chauvin is the first one who we've seen a white man who's an officer, who's a former officer, be held accountable. And so for me, this is just a little step in the right direction, a little beacon of hope to say, hey, black lives really do matter, and you will be held accountable if you murder black people here in Minnesota.
All right, it's MPR News. Leslie Redmond, former president of the Minneapolis branch of the NAACP. Thank you very much for your perspective on this. I wanted to talk with you further, but I do understand that very shortly here we are going to hear from Keith Ellison, Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. Close. He will react because it is his team that prosecuted this case and got the guilty verdict. So we'll bring that to you when it happens. Angela Davis here with me as well, and we heard the reaction there from Angela Redmond. What else are you seeing out there?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of people in the black community here in Minnesota, a lot of black leaders really just talking about having an opportunity to finally exhale, to really be able, I guess people are expressing a sense of relief. And so I can pass this on. State Representative Cedric Frazier, who is actually scheduled to be a guest on my talk show tomorrow, he just tweeted, "The guilty verdict is great news. Derek Chauvin will face consequences for the murder of George Floyd, but this isn't justice in my eyes. We need a system of public safety that values black life. Yes, this case is historic, but we have so much work to do, Minnesota." Dr. Rachel Hardiman, who's also been a guest on my show in the past. She's a public health official. I was born and raised in Minnesota. She says, I know what it means to be Black here. I have been afraid to be hopeful because justice is rare when it comes to Black lives. In this moment, I have hope for a better future for our daughters and sons. That's what Dr. Rachel Hardiman just shared. And we're also hearing other people talking about just the anxiety leading up to the verdict. Ron tweeted, we should have awakened this morning knowing the outcome of this trial. A true and just system wouldn't have made us wonder. Justice shouldn't feel shocking, and because of this, the work continues. Rest easy, Mr. Floyd. And a friend of mine who lives out on the East Coast, Michael, he tweeted, like, the verdict should have been obvious, but it's a shame how much anxiety I and just about every other Black person I know felt that it would go the other way because so many times in the past it did. And so someone else also too, Tom, I want to share this, reminded us about the 17-year-old girl who shot the video of George Floyd there on the ground with Derek Chauvin's knee, pinning him there on the ground, his knee and his neck for more than 9 minutes. Nathan tweeted, it's hard to imagine we'd have this verdict if not for Darnella Frazier, the 17-year-old girl who took out her cell phone and recorded Derek Chauvin killing George Floyd. And we will remember in the very first days of testimony during the prosecution's case that Darnella took the stand and testified. And even though we could not see her because she, is, a minor, we weren't able to see her face. We could hear the audio. And she shared how she still has nightmares and feels guilty that she wasn't able to do more to save the life of George Floyd. Right. So people thinking about some of the witnesses and just how so many lives have been affected by the life that was lost by Mr. Floyd.
And that was a theme in the prosecution, Angela, that came up, especially with the first round of witnesses who were eyewitnesses to the event. It seemed that almost every one of them said that they felt terrible, that they couldn't have done something to save George Floyd's life or to give him assistance.
And I just, for me, just as a news consumer as well as a journalist, the exposure to the video, the value of it in the case obviously is evidence, it's clear, but just how difficult, how traumatizing it was to repeatedly see it and hear it in news coverage. But then because of cameras in the courtroom, being exposed to it again, I've just spent so much time thinking about the members of the jury and what they went through in 3 weeks of testimony, watching police body camera video, watching the bystander video, hearing the audio of not just the words of George Floyd, but the moaning and the pleading and the begging for life. And I think I will always, as I continue to think about George Floyd, I will think about the members of this jury and how their lives are forever changed by having such a critical role in this case.
Angela Davis here with me. I'm Tom Cran. Live coverage of guilty verdicts this afternoon on all 3 counts for Derek Chauvin in the murder of George Floyd. And a lot going on this afternoon. I thought we'd hear from Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, expected. I understand there's a gathering going on for a news conference. Not everyone's there yet, but when he speaks as the prosecutor of this case, we will bring that to you live. We also expect to hear this afternoon from Governor Tim Walz and from President Joe Biden, and we'll do our best to bring you those remarks. Hopefully they won't all talk at the same time. But we'll have full coverage, as well as our reporters, as you heard Matt Sepik at George Floyd Square, and our John Collins, who was at the Hennepin County Government Center in the annex for the media. But then he said they were clearing the building, and so they told him he had to leave. So he's got to go to the bureau, because what they did earlier, when before the verdict was read, but when there was news that the jury had reached a verdict and they were being brought back in, they cleared the Hennepin County Government Center, and our Tim Nelson is outside as well to get reaction. We'll bring that all to you this afternoon here on MPR News. We are waiting to hear from Keith Ellison, Attorney General of Minnesota, former congressman, a prosecutor in this case, and we also understand there at near the podium will be Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman as well, whose office assisted in the gathering of evidence and in the prosecution. We'll hear from Keith Ellison momentarily now here on NPR News. Again, if you're just joining us, a jury has found former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin guilty on all 3 counts: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Chauvin was charged in the killing last May of George Floyd. Chauvin was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. He will be sentenced at a later time, and as we heard from one of our legal experts earlier, as we heard from one of our earlier legal consultants that we had on the air, that there will be a sentencing on the top charge. So right now, we're going to bring in Valerie Castile, who is the mother of Philando Castile, and I want to get Mrs. Castile. I want to get your reaction today to the verdict this afternoon, and you have a unique perspective on this, waiting for a jury to announce such a verdict. So,
come on up, team. No gaps, no gaps. Keep it tight. Shift a little bit more this way and then come in just a little bit tighter. Beyond just tight. Yeah, more like that. Yeah, there's actually more room on this side.
There's more room on this side?
Yeah, more room to your right. Yep. Can we see everybody? Yes, thank you. That's much better. So Natasha, people got to be able to see the baby too. So.
Especially after the baby ran here, right?
Yeah. Baby on board. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keith Ellison. I'm the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. And since the investigation and prosecution of this case began last May, everyone involved has pursued one goal: justice. We pursued justice wherever it led. When I became the lead prosecutor for the case, I asked for time and patience to review the facts, gather evidence, and prosecute for the murder of George Floyd to the fullest extent the law allowed. I want to thank the community for giving us that time and allowing us to do our work. That long, hard, painstaking work has culminated today. I would not call today's verdict justice, however, because justice implies true restoration. But it is accountability, which is the first step towards justice. And now the cause of justice is in your hands. And when I say your hands, I mean the hands of the people of the United States. George Floyd mattered. He was loved by his family and his friends. His death shocked the conscience of our community, our country, the whole world. He was loved by his family and friends. But that isn't why he mattered. He mattered because he was a human being. And there is no way we can turn away from that reality. The people who stopped and raised their voices on May 25th, 2020, were a bouquet of humanity, a phrase I stole from my friend Jerry Blackwell. A bouquet of humanity, old, young, men and women, black and white, a man from the neighborhood just walking to get a drink, a child going to buy a snack with her cousin, an off-duty firefighter on her way to a community garden, brave young women, teenagers, who press record on their cell phones. Why did they stop? They didn't know George Floyd. They didn't know he had a beautiful family. They didn't know he had been a great athlete. And they didn't know he was a proud father, or that he had people in his life who loved him. They stopped and raised their voices, and they even challenged authority because they saw his humanity. They stopped and they raised their voices because they knew that what they were seeing was wrong. They didn't need to be medical professionals or experts in the use of force. They knew it was wrong, and they were right. These community members, this bouquet of humanity, did it again in this trial. They performed simple yet profound acts of courage. They told the truth and they told the whole world the truth about what they saw. They were vindicated by the chief of police, by Minneapolis' longest serving police officer, and by many other police officers who stepped up and testified as to what they saw and to what they knew. What happened on that street was wrong. We owe it, and we owe our gratitude to fulfilling we owe them our gratitude for fulfilling their civic duty and for their courage in telling the truth. To countless people in Minnesota and across the United States who joined them in peacefully demanding justice for George Floyd, we say, all of us, thank you. In the coming days, more may seek to express themselves again through petition and demonstration. I urge everyone to honor the legacy of George Floyd by doing so calmly, legally, and peacefully. I urge everyone to continue the journey to transformation and justice. It's in your hands now. I also want to address the Floyd family, if I may. Over the last year, the family of George Floyd had to relive again and again the worst day of their lives when they lost their brother, their father, their friend. I'm profoundly grateful to them for giving us the time we needed to prosecute this case. They have shown the world what grace and class and courage really look like. Although a verdict alone cannot end their pain, I hope it's another step on the long path toward healing for them. There's no replacing your beloved Perry, or Floyd, as his friends called him, but he is the one who sparked a worldwide movement, and that's important. We owe our thanks to the men and women of the jury who gave many hours of their time and attention to carefully listening to the evidence, weighing the facts, rendering a verdict. They are regular people from all walks of life, a lot like that bouquet of humanity on that corner on May 25th and in that courtroom. They answered the call, and they served in a landmark trial. They now deserve to return to their lives. If they ask you to respect their privacy, we ask you to honor that request. I want to acknowledge the remarkable team that helped us prosecute the case. We put everything we had into this prosecution. We presented the best case that we could, and the jury heard us, and we're grateful for that. We had the sole burden of proof in the case, and history shows that winning cases like these can be difficult. I'm proud of every hour, every minute, and every ounce of effort we put in this case. And let me tell you, we spent many hours working on this case, did we not? We, week after week, committee meeting after committee meeting, this team never let up and it never quit. We fought every day, and we did it together. The Attorney General's office together with the Hennepin County Attorney's office. Thank you, sir. And we did it together. I'm deeply grateful to everyone who worked on the case. Most of these folks will tell you it's a bad idea to put together a team of all Michael Jordans. Nobody would want to pass the ball. This team, that was their true strength, is sharing the load, passing the ball, understanding that all of us together are smarter than any one of us alone. And that worked. Although the verdict has been rendered, this is not the end. In the coming weeks, the court will determine sentencing, and later this summer, we expect to present another case. We will not be talking about that. This verdict reminds us how hard it is to make enduring change. And I just want to finish by sharing some important historical legacy, if you allow me. In 1968, the Kerner Commission was formed to investigate the causes of uprisings across major American cities. And a man named Dr. Kenneth Clark, a famous African-American psychologist who, along with his equally accomplished psychologist wife, Mamie, contributed to compelling research in the Brown versus Board of Education case. And Dr. Clark testified at the Kerner Commission. And I want to quote you what he said. I read that report, the one in the 1919 riot in Chicago, and it was as if I were reading the report of investigating the committee of the Harlem riot in 1935, the report on investigating the Harlem riot in 1943, and the report of the McCone Commission on the Watts riot. I must say again in candor to you, the members of this commission, it's like a kind of an Alice in Wonderland with the same moving picture reshown over and over again, the same analysis, the same recommendation, and the same inaction. Those are the words of Dr. Clark in 1968. Here we are in 2021. Here we are in 2021, still addressing the same problem. Since Dr. Clark testified, we have seen Rodney King, Abner Louima, Oscar Grant, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, Laquan McDonald, Stephon Clark, Atiana Jefferson, Anton Black, Breonna Taylor, and now Dante Wright and Adam Toledo. This has to end. We need true justice. That's not one case. That is a social transformation that says that nobody's beneath the law and no one is above it. This verdict reminds us that we must make enduring systemic societal change. More than a month ago, months before George Floyd was murdered, the Minnesota Public Safety Commissioner John Harrington and I released the recommendations of our working group on reducing deadly force encounters with law enforcement. What all of us in that working group, including law enforcement, wanted is for everyone to go home safe. Anytime someone doesn't, everyone's lives are changed forever. We need to use this verdict as an inflection point. What if we just prevented the problem instead of having to try these cases? We don't want any more community members dying at the hands of law enforcement and their families' lives ruined. We don't want any more law enforcement members having to face criminal charges and their families' lives ruined. We don't want any more communities torn apart. One way to prevent this is to get into a new relationship where we as a society re-examine the use of force and our old settled assumptions. I'm so proud of Chief Arredondo and the Minneapolis police officers who by their testimony said enough is enough. And another way to prevent it is by acknowledging and lifting up everyone's humanity, helping communities heal, and officers be well. Another way to prevent it is with accountability. Passing laws and instituting policies and training is important, but they must be more than words on paper, and there must be accountability for violating them. With this verdict, we have brought some accountability. Finally, this verdict demands us to never give up the hope that we can make enduring change. Generations of people said slavery would never end. Generations said Jim Crow would never end. Generations said women would never be equal to men. Generations said if you were different in any way, you could never be a full and equal member of our society. Today, we have to end this travesty of recurring, enduring deaths at the hands of law enforcement. Those beliefs are things we have to focus our attention on. And as I now do close, I just want to say to you, the work of our generation is to put unaccountable law enforcement behind us. It's time to transform the relationship between community and the people who are sworn to protect them from one that is mistrustful, suspicious, and in some cases terrifying, into one that is empathetic, compassionate, and affirming. That will benefit everyone, including police officers who deserve to serve in a profession that is honored, in departments where they don't have to worry about colleagues who don't follow the rules. Now that work is in your hands. The work of our generation is to put an end to the vestiges of Jim Crow and the centuries of trauma and finally put an end to racism. We can end it. It doesn't have to be with us into the future if we decide now to have true liberty and justice for all. The work of our generation is to say goodbye to old practices that don't serve us anymore and to put them all behind us. One conviction even one like this one can create a powerful new opening to shed old practices and reset relationships. So with that, I just want to say that I do hope that people step forward and understand that nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. You can do something the way like everyday people like Donald Williams and Genevieve Hanson and Christopher Martin and Charles McMillan and all those teenagers and young people stepped up and did something. You can do things like help pass the George Floyd Justice and Accountability Act. It's in your hands. Let's get the work done. And now I'd like to invite my friend and partner in justice, Michael Freeman, Hennepin County Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. First, I want once again to extend my heartfelt sympathies to the families of George Floyd. I hope today's verdict provides some measure of closure for them. And let me say what a tremendous job Attorney General Keith Ellison did in recruiting and organizing a talented team of prosecutors and supporting staff. Great job. Matt Frank, Jerry Blackwell, Steve Schlischer, and Aaron Eldridge were exceptional. Their use of experts, evidence, and witnesses left the jury no alternative but to find Mr. Chauvin guilty. We and the people of Minnesota should rightly be proud of these four and your entire staff of volunteers and assistant attorney generals and the jobs they did over the last 7 weeks. I'm also proud from the moment that the Hennepin County Attorney's Office charged Derek Chauvin with murder and manslaughter 4 days after George Floyd's murder, our team worked long hours side by side with the Attorney General's team. Managing Attorney Gene Burdorf did legal analysis and writing. Assistant Hennepin County Attorney Joshua Larson did witness prep and strategy development. And Vernona Boswell, manager of our Victim Services Division, has been in direct contact for nearly a year now with the family of George Floyd. Victim and witness advocates Jessica Immerman and Keith Johnson managed all the witnesses, civilian and professional. My two deputies, Lolita Iowa and Andy Lefevre, and I supplied strategic advice and coordination to this talented team 24/7. These guilty verdicts against Mr. Chauvin cannot be the end of the conversation about officer killings of civilians. We need to prevent these killings in the first place. The Minnesota legislature, as it moves into the final 3 weeks of the session, must pass a number of bills that will make policing fairer and safer for all, but especially for black men and women and other people of color. I've been lobbying legislators to pass these critical bills. If they fail, then it will be time once again to have a statewide task force to hold hearings and come up with model legislation intending to put an end to these deaths. I am prepared to be part of that fight. Again, Keith, great job.
Thank you, Mike. And now I'd like to ask the trial lawyers to share some thoughts if they have any. But before I do that, I'd like to myself thank a number of people. And I'm just going to start by, why don't we just have our trial lawyers come forward, and then we'll thank our whole team. So, Jerry, Steve, which one of y'all want to do it? Matt, where's Matt?
Thank you, Attorney General Ellison. And when I say thank you to Attorney General Ellison, I want to thank you for calling me and calling me back into public service, which is something that I was able to do as a federal prosecutor, as a state prosecutor, as an assistant county attorney in the United States Army. And when I left private practice, I thought those days were behind me, but I received a call, and it was from Keith Ellison. And he gave me the opportunity to step back into public service, something that is so important to me, something that I cherish. And I would just encourage anyone, if you get a call like that as an attorney, it's a privileged life, it's a noble profession. And if somebody calls you and they ask you for help, don't overthink it. Just do it. As I've found in my career, you you get a lot more than you give. I'm honored to have stood with the Floyd family, to stood with the state of Minnesota as we go through this painful process together. And it's been my privilege to practice with this incredible, gifted trial team. And so I stand here today in gratitude. I'm thankful. I want to thank the jury for their service, for doing what was right and decent and correct and speaking the truth and finding the right verdict in this case.
I'm Jerry Blackwell, and my comments are going to be fairly brief. I want to first say thank you to all of these selfless servants that you see standing here and the many more that you do not see, who had the willingness, the courage, the passion, the intentional fortitude to get into good trouble. They stepped into the light and they shined. And for that I say thank you. I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I've had to serve. Now, no verdict can bring George Perry Floyd back to us. But this verdict does give a message to his family that he was somebody, that his life mattered, that all of our lives matter. And that's important. And I also hope that this verdict, for all of the rest of collective, all of us, will help us further along the road toward a better humanity. Thank you all.
Matt Frank.
Well, I can't really follow that too much, but I just want to say that it's been really a privilege to work with this awesome group of dedicated, hardworking people in this endeavor. But it's also been just a total privilege to get to know the Floyd family and to spend time with them and get to know them. Because first and foremost, this is for you, George Floyd, and for your family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, man. So let me also thank very publicly Aaron Eldridge, who was part of our trial team, who's not here today, but was indispensable. Lola Velasquez Agaloo, thank you, Lola, for a wonderful job that you did. Josh Larson. Josh, thanks so much, my friend. Zuri Balmakun. Thank you, Zuri. And Natasha Robinson. I want to thank you and the next generation, the next generation of justice seekers. Dion Dodd, I want to thank you. Dion, where are you? Thank you very much. And I want to thank you, Vernona Boswell. You are a star. And I also want to thank so many other people. But with that, we're going to close our comments right now and just say that we're prepared to continue to pursue justice. Thank you.
Mr. Ellison, what kind of sentence are you going to see? Pardon me?
Hey, the deputies are here to escort you. The exits are clear right now. So.
By George Floyd, in light of the sacrifice that he made. He paid the price with his blood for this moment and for laws and policies around the country and the world to change.
And I want to ask you how you think this verdict affects police reform moving forward. Proposals we heard again from Attorney General Ellison and from Mike Freeman as well. These conversations have been happening for a while, and I'm wondering what you think this signifies moving forward.
I think that this signifies one trial and one moment in history that shows that police officers are not above the law when they take the life of a human being without justification. However, this moment didn't happen because the system worked. This moment happened because the people put in the work. We had to demand justice and accountability. We had to demand that those officers be fired. We had to demand that the case be removed from the hands of Attorney General Mike Freeman, who waited several days to charge the case, who secretly tried to negotiate a plea agreement with Derek Chauvin, which did not happen, thankfully, because of then Attorney General William Barr. And we had to put pressure on the governor to put the case into the hands of the Attorney General and to pressure the Attorney General to bring more serious charges in this case. So step by step by step, the people played a significant role in the outcome of this case. If we had sat back and waited for someone else to do it, justice would not be served, and this case would have been swept under the rug like so many others have been.
Nakima Levy-Armstrong with us here on MPR News. I'm Tom Cran. A couple of minutes now, almost after 5 p.m., a little less than an hour ago, the verdict was read in open court in Hennepin County Courthouse in the 18th floor courtroom, which we got very used to seeing and hearing from over the last 3 weeks or so. And that verdict is guilty on 3 counts. Derek Chauvin guilty in the murder of George Floyd. So as I said, I'm Tom Cran, MPR News, and Angela Davis here with me as well, with Nakima Levy-Armstrong getting reaction to today's verdict. Angela.
Yes, I'm here. And Nakima, I wanted to ask you a question. I mean, I know that you're a mother, and I know you have a lot of concerns about the youth in our community, as I do, in the Black community. And I'm just thinking about when we all wake up tomorrow and we're thinking about the future. And I'm still thinking about, just the mental health decline that we've seen during the pandemic and how vulnerable everyone has been. But, what conversations do we need to be having now, and who needs to be talking, and who needs to be involved in addressing the harm that has been done in the past, the harm that we've experienced in seeing, what happened to George Floyd. What do we need to focus on now moving forward?
Well, I think that in addition to this being a moment of celebration, it should also be a sobering moment for people across the state of Minnesota, across the country, and across the world. The reality is that Derek Chauvin was allowed to kill George Floyd and abuse many other people before George Floyd because most people were silent in the face of reports of police brutality and police use of deadly force. It has been a relatively small group of people who have consistently been pounding the pavement, shutting things down and taking the heat for it, and disrupting government meetings and doing everything we possibly can to try to get the attention of the powers that be so that they can take action. And so for those who sat on the sidelines, they need to ask themselves why. Why haven't I been involved? Why haven't I taken this seriously? Am I perceiving this as one bad apple, but the rest of the system is great? Which we know as African Americans, that is far from being the case. This is very much a problem of systemic racism and white supremacy within the Minneapolis Police Department and police departments around the state and across the country. And so there is a need for an overhaul of the system of policing in the Twin Cities and around the state. But will people take the steps that are necessary to change things, such as applying pressure to Governor Walz and to the elected officials at the local, county, and state levels? I have not seen people do that other than a small group of folks, because even as we celebrate the jury verdict in this case, we're still having to contend with the militarized police force, the National Guard, cops coming in from out of state who are heavily armed with chemical weapons and lethal weapons, and the harm that has already been caused to those who have been out protesting and demonstrating and even standing up for Dante Wright, a young 20-year-old African-American man who was killed just over a week ago. So we have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of people who need to be doing the work and who need to not just admire these problems, but help shoulder the load of responsibility to address this situation.
We remembered how Eric Garner said, "I can't breathe," 11 times. His mother came with us to the site. The family came in, and this family has stood together for the last 11 months, watching this video go over and over and over again. This family stood with pain, suffering,
and not knowing what the future held, because so many families went and got nothing. They thanked God when they got the indictment, which would not have happened had not the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, took this case. And Keith Ellison fought and put together a team that made this possible. And this is the first time in the history of this state that a white police officer has been convicted, less known convicted, of a murder. This is the first time in a long array of fights that we've seen 3 counts, guilty at all 3. We don't find pleasure in this. We don't celebrate a man going to jail. We would have rather George be alive. Amen. But we celebrate that we, because young people, white and black, some castigated, many that are here tonight, marched and kept marching and kept going. Many of them looked down on, but they kept marching and wouldn't let this die. And this is an assurance to them that if we don't give up, that we can win some rounds. But the war and the fight is not over. Just 2 days from now, we're going to have to deal with the funeral of Dante Wright in this same county, the same area. We still have cases to fight, but this gives us the energy to fight on. And we are determined that we're going to fight until we make federal law the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act must be law. We want to thank all that were involved, especially the Attorney General and the Governor and others. We want to thank President Biden, who the first time he came out of his house during the campaign, he flew to Houston and met with the family and Attorney Crump and I. And he sat there, and I will never forget, he said to George's daughter that I heard you say your father is going to change the world. Well, we can now tell George's daughter she was right. Her father has begun the changing of the world for real. But before we do anything, we first want to pray and thank God, because somehow God made a way. He had mercy. We believe in a God that can even get through the cracks in a jury room and bring conscience and bring truth. And that jury, we want to thank them for letting God give them the strength wherever they are tonight. We want them to know we broke down in tears when we heard the verdict. We had to hold each other and hug in tears because too many nights we've cried. Many of us for decades spent nights in jail. But today we can wipe our tears away and fight on for another day. There's sunlight. We're going to keep going till we bring it for the Eric Gardners and the Breonna Taylors, whose boyfriend is here tonight. Kenny Walker. Sean Bell. So many that did not get this night. This night is for them. Let us pray. Let's lock arms and pray like we can, folks. Where? Come on, Brandon. Where's Filoni? Right here. Come on. Yeah, come on. You and Rodney come up front. You know you're hiding now. Brother Chris. Get next to the Attorney General there. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for giving us the strength to stand together. Sometimes we would question each other. Sometimes we say this is just going to be a waste of time. But somehow you touch us in the midnight hours and teach us to hold on. And that if we would be faithful over a few things, you'd give us the victory over many. We thank you because we know it was not any doing of ours, but your loving kindness and your tender mercy that made tonight possible. Bless those that worked, that made this prosecution something they couldn't deny. Bless those policemen that got on the stand and testified against another policeman. Bless the jury that listened to the evidence and didn't listen to those that may criticize them for doing this. Bless the prosecutor, Keith Ellison, and his staff that did their job, even though they didn't know what the outcome would be. Bless Ben Crump in a special way, that worked tirelessly, that jumped on planes and left his family to make sure that justice would rain down. Thank you for all of the civil and human rights leaders that stood up. And we thank you for the nameless grandmas and grandpas that would get on their knees and ask you to give us a victory this time. And Lord, as we give you the thanks and give you the praise, let George know that his name is going down in history. They may have put their knee on his neck, but he will now be a figure that we will take the knees off our necks now, and we give you the praise. Thank you. And God, we give you the glory. These blessings we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Let me say that I want to bring on now a man who has symbolized the fight for justice. He didn't seek the role, but he rose to the occasion. America, for many years, didn't have someone to stand for us. The last 4 years, we didn't have an Attorney General's office that would even hear our cry. But we had been raised to believe that God always has a ram in the bush. And God has a way of taking the most humble of people and raising them up. We had an Attorney General in Black America that has represented these cases with the acumen and skill of one that was raised in the South but came to claim this nation in a new direction. I bring you the Attorney General for Black America, Ben Crump.
Yeah. I love
it. Thank you, Reverend Al Sharpton, not only for your mentorship, not only for being a great civil rights leader, but for being a moral authority, especially making sure no matter what happened, that we always maintained the moral high ground, knowing that we were on the right side of history as we fought for justice for George Perry Floyd Jr. Say his name. George Floyd. I am but a member of a great team of very talented attorneys. And I'm going to acknowledge them. Yeah, we got the Omegas and the Kappas, Reverend Jackson. That's right. That's right. And the Alphas in it. That's right. I want to acknowledge these great group of lawyers and then the family members. 2 or 3 of the lawyers will address you. And then at that time, we will hear from the family members before we take any of your questions. I want to acknowledge a great lawyer from Chicago, Illinois, one of the best I've ever had a chance to work with, Attorney Tony Romanucci. I want to recognize my partner on the front line in this case, one of the best lawyers at Ben Onum. He hails from Atlanta, Georgia, Attorney Chris Stewart. His law partner, Attorney Justin Miller. Attorney Madeline Simmons. A great Minnesota lawyers, Attorney Jeff Storms. Raise your hand, Jeff. Attorney Michelle Godot. And who else we got here? Anybody else?
Attorney.
We have Attorney Scott Masterson, who's not present. Attorney Bavani. I said Michelle. We got Michelle. All right. And just a great group of lawyers. And I want to let you know who we have present here with the family here in Minneapolis for this historic day. We have George Floyd's brothers. We have Philonise Floyd. We have Rodney Floyd. We have Brandon Williams, who's George Floyd's nephew, but was more like a son to him. They call him Woo back in the Third Ward. Woo, 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 woo. We have Keita Floyd, Philonis's wife. We have, oh, where Terrence at? Terrence, New York, where you at? We got Terrence Floyd, his sisters who are not with us, but we should absolutely acknowledge Bridget Floyd, who hails from North Carolina, his sisters LaTanya and Jaja, who hail from Houston, Texas. We have his cousins, Sharita McGee, Tidra McGee, and Tara Brown. And we have the mother of his daughter, Gianni Floyd. We have Roxy Washington, and we have Gianna. And so I'll make some brief remarks, and then we're going to have Attorney Stewart. Oh,
Angela, cousin Paris.
Angela, cousin Paris,
And his uncle
and Uncle Selwyn, Vince. Any more Floyd family? I know it's a big crew. AD, the man he came to Minneapolis with, and Adara. So I'll make some brief remarks, and then we're going to have Attorney Stewart and Attorney Ramanucci make some brief remarks, and then we're going to hear from this family, and we're going to try to leave here today knowing that America is a better country.
Yes.
America, let's pause for a moment to proclaim this historical moment, not just for the legacy of George Floyd, but for the legacy of America. The legacy of trying to make America for all Americans, so that George Floyd's victory and America's quest for equal justice under the law will be intertwined. America, let's frame this moment as a moment where we finally are getting close to living up to our Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equally, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that amongst them are life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Where America, that means all of us. That means black people. That means Hispanic people. That means Native people. That means Asian people. That means all of us, America. We frame this moment for all of us, not just for George Floyd. This is a victory for those who champion humanity over inhumanity, those who champion justice over injustice, those who champion morals over immorality. America, let's lean into this moment, and let's make sure, Reverend Al, that this moment will be documented for our children yet unborn as they continue on the journey to justice, knowing that the blood of George Floyd will give them a trail to find a way to a better America, a more just America, where Breonna Taylor gets an opportunity to sleep in peace at night without the police busting in her front door. A more just America, where Ahmaud Arbery gets to run free and not be lynched for jogging while black. A more just America, where Jacob Blake and Anthony McClain and Walter Scott and Laquan McDonald and all these other black men, Terrence Crutcher, who was shot in the back while running away like Dante Wright was just a week ago, because for some reason black men running away from the police is more dangerous than young white men who commit mass murders and walk towards the police with an assault weapon, Reverend Bryant, like Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Wow.
America, let this be the precedent.
Yes.
Let this be the precedent where we live up to the high ideals and the promises when we say liberty and justice for all. Those sun-kissed children are included in all. Those children who overcame slavery, the Middle Passage, the Dred Scott decision, Plessy v. Ferguson, Jim Crow, and his much smarter, wiser son, Jim Crow Jr. Esquire. Let this be the precedence where we overcome systematic racism and oppression, and that we are a better people, and we will leave our children a better world for us all. At this time, we will hear from a great lawyer, because nobody does this alone. It's always a team effort. And we have the lawyers, the preachers, the civil rights leaders, the education leaders, the activists.
Yes, yes.
Let's give a big round of applause for the activists.
Yeah, that's right.
The people who stayed in the streets.
That's right.
The people who came nationally, but more importantly, the people who were here locally, who were standing up for George Floyd on 38th and Chicago Avenue, day in and day out. Silky, the people who wouldn't go home, wouldn't stay quiet. Reverend Jackson, the people who followed y'all example.
Don't forget about the witness.
Donald Williams. Donald Williams. Donald supposed to be here.
Yeah.
So, we love you, Donna. Without further ado, my brother, Attorney Chris Stewart. And Tony, you coming up next.
Come on.
Slide right here.
We all right. We got Steve Harvey.
The first.
Steve Harvey, suit saying full effect.
The first thing that happened when we heard the verdict is that we all teared up and embraced. So don't confuse these tears thinking that they are sorrow. Because those were the tears that happen to African Americans when they're pulled over constantly on the side of the road and know they can't get help. Those are the tears of the victims that we've seen time and time again be shot in the back, choked over loose cigarettes, or killed for no reason, and justice never comes. Those are the tears that someone will weep tomorrow when they are taken advantage of in an interaction with law enforcement. But today the tears are pure joy.
Yes.
Pure joy and pure shock, because days like this don't happen. The whole world should not have to rally to get justice for one man.
Yes, wow.
But that's what happened.
Amen.
Wow.
This wasn't a city case. This wasn't one family's case. This was the entire world's case. And justice finally came.
Yes.
But it shouldn't have to be so hard to attain this level of justice in cases like this, when we can see with our own eyes the only difference is the color of skin. And that's the change that we all want. That's not a change that's outrageous. Yes, law enforcement have a dangerous job. They have to carry a spear and a sword and a shield. But all too often, African Americans only get the spear or the sword.
Wow.
We need more of the shield.
Yeah, amen. Yes.
Amen. Because this is not a case against every officer. My life was saved by 2 law enforcement officers years ago. So I will never throw every cop under the bus. But we will put more cops in jail when you kill someone for no reason, just because they're black.
Amen.
And we can find a unifying purpose between law enforcement and the African American community. by changes starting with the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act.
Amen.
A beautifully written bill that will help protect the community and solve policing. And the main question is, will we let politics divide us? Because that's what happens. Republican or Democrat, you're going to stick to your side. Unify, as Ben has been saying, as Rev has been saying, and get this bill passed and save people so that you don't have to board up your own cities for situations like this. And if not, we'll see you next time when it's time to vote.
Amen.
You've seen what's happened across this country.
Say it.
Say it.
And we shouldn't have to be so happy when we finally get one. But we are in celebration for Gianna, for Roxy, who has stood strong this entire time, for the brothers and sisters, for the activists like Tamika and everybody out here, for this entire group. And it wouldn't have happened without every single one of y'all, white or black, people out there praying for this family, getting love and support. And we love all of you all. Let this be a changing point in America for policing in a positive way, and let's unify. Thank you, my brother.
Love you, man. Attorney Tony Romanucci from Chicago, Illinois.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Ben said, my name is Tony Romanucci. I'm smiling here today, not for myself, but really for the entire country and for the world that's watching. I know that on behalf of the family and for everyone who's here today, that we stand here before you feeling a tremendous amount of joy and eternal hope. For me, 36 years ago, I was a young public defender in Cook County. Reverend Jackson, I know you know that place very well. And that's where I was introduced to the marginalization of black and brown people. And for now, this is the 36th year I've seen it come through. I really feel that this country has turned a corner. But I'm going to tell you, it was a tough corner to turn, and it couldn't have been done. And I'm going to reach out to you all, the press, for spreading the message, to the strength and wisdom of Ben Crump.
That's right.
To you, Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend Jackson, the attorneys, Chris, Justin, Madeline, Jeff, Michelle, Ivani, Nicolette, Ian, all the teams in all the cities in this country, the Attorney General and their magnificent prosecution team. They did it, right?
Yes, they did.
They tied up every loose thread for that jury. They let them follow it right through. They showed them how to prosecute and how to convict.
Yes, they did.
And we are so grateful. But make no mistake, we are not done. The George Floyd Policing and Reform Act must pass the Senate.
Yes. Amen.
We now know that today, police can and will be held accountable for needless death. This death never should have happened. George should have been alive somewhere with his daughter Gianna playing on a playground.
Amen.
That's right.
From now on, everyone's on notice that police will be held accountable, but we will be held accountable too. This whole country should be held accountable, but police especially. I am so thankful to all of you. I am hopeful for a greater America, for a great vote of confidence. I will tell you that Speaker Pelosi called us not once today, but twice. Our Speaker is a great leader. She is somebody that wants to see this through. We have a great president who wants to see this through. We have one little hiccup in between. Let's get this past the Senate.
Yes, sir.
Let's get justice in America once and for all and forever. One last comment. I met a young lady yesterday. Her name was Lamaya. She said one thing to me that I promised her that I would repeat today. Lamaya is not part of the Floyd family, but she is part of the Wright family. And she said one thing, and I promised her I would say it today. We are all God's children.
Yes.
Thank you, Lamaya.
Thank you, Tony. And I know Speaker Pelosi called, we need to acknowledge when we were over at the courthouse as we were leaving, I got one of those calls and we stopped everything.
No idea.
And it was Chris and Philonis and Roxy, all of us, Justin, as we were walking out, we stopped in mid-sentence because President Joe Biden called to talk about what a moment this was for America and how we have to use this moment to build on. So we want to acknowledge President Biden acknowledging that we are all a better America today. Mm-hmm. Isn't that what he said?
And Kamala.
Okay. Okay. And we got so many good staff people to thank: Jim McGuffin, Michelle, Adner, Roma, all these people who've been working, you know, in the vineyards, supporting our lawyers, Silky, everybody. But briefly, we want to have, we can't be in Minneapolis and not have a representative, whether Jeff and Michelle want to come up and say a word. Our great Minnesota co-counselor, Jeff Storms. Michelle, get it up.
So I just briefly want to say, I love this city. I love this state. And no longer can we be known for these massively infamous failures in civil rights.
Wow.
We owe our children and our community more. From this moment further, from this conviction now, we have to be leaders in this country on civil rights. And everyone standing up here will work tirelessly until that happens. And I challenge everybody else in Minnesota to make that same effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Can we, because they're trying to get everybody take a step back. Let's try to make the podium. Let's try to make the podium. Just everybody take a step back. We're gonna have the family. We're gonna have this. We're gonna have the family come up. Okay. Okay. We're gonna have the family come and try to greet you all. So you got Arthur. You got to back up too. So the camera's trying to. The camera's trying to get the podium, yeah. So, right now, okay. And right now, we're gonna bring up a man who, when y'all first met him, Tony, y'all remember, all he could do is cry because he was heartbroken. He was heartbroken because remember, so many times it's a case to us. Tamika is a cause. You know, my son is a hashtag. But to them, this was their flesh and blood. Maria, they slept in the bed with George. I mean, the stories that they tell, you know this was a close family. He tells those stories over there how he used to pee on George. But yeah, he has become so dignified and articulate and expressing not just the fight for justice for his family, not just the fight for justice for Black America, but he really has become so articulate and saying we have to fight for all Americans. Mr. Philonis Floyd.
Hey, my nephew, he calling me Baby Al. Jesse calling me Steve Harvey. But man, I feel relieved today that I finally have the opportunity for hopefully getting some sleep. A lot of days that I prayed and I hoped and I was speaking everything into existence. I said I have faith that he will be convicted. It's been a long journey, and it's been less than a year. And the person that comes to my mind is 1955, and to me, he was the first George Floyd. That was Emmett Till.
Wow. Wow.
I did was on CNN with Deborah Watts, and she just brought him back to life.
Wow.
People forgot about him.
Yeah.
But he was the first George Floyd.
Yes.
But today, you have the cameras all around the world to see and show what happened to my brother. It was a motion picture, the world seeing his life being extinguished. And I could do nothing but watch, especially in that courtroom over and over and over again as my brother was murdered. Times, they're getting harder every day. 10 miles away from here, Mr. Wright, Dante Wright.
That's right. Yeah.
He should still be here. We have to always understand that we have to march. We will have to do this for life. We have to protest because it seems like this is a never-ending cycle.
Yeah.
Reverend Al always told me, we got to keep fighting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put up a fight every day because I'm not just fighting for George anymore. I'm fighting for everybody around this world.
Yeah.
I get calls, I get DMs, people from Brazil, from Ghana, from Germany, everybody, London, Italy, they're all saying the same thing. We won't be able to breathe until you're able to breathe.
That's right.
Today, we are able to breathe again. Ms. Garner, I told you, we'll get justice. And we're going to fight for you too. We're going to fight for everybody. Thank you all so much for just giving us this time because we're here and we're not going anywhere. And I want to thank all the protesters, all the attorneys who stepped up, all the activists who stepped up, and many who think they're not activists but advocates. Thank you all.
Amen.
Because justice for George means freedom for all.
All right. All right. Yeah, you did, man. All right. Terrence Floyd. We will have Terrence Floyd, George's brother from New York City. The man, the preacher. Reverend Floyd.
I'm not going to preach today. Man.
You ain't going to preach today?
Come on, T. Oh, man. So many emotions right now. But I'm very thankful and grateful. Grateful for the people in this world, for the support, the prayers, the love that was shown, whether you sent it by social media or whether you sent it emails or however. We just appreciate the love. I appreciate the team, the Crump Law team. I call him Unc. I call him Unc. We built a bond, a relationship through this whole journey. I appreciate him. He would call me. I'm all the way in New York. He'll call me and check up on me and ask me I'm all right because I'm the only one up there. Everybody else is down south. So, but he never thought it robbery to check up on me, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for Reverend Sharpton.
Yeah.
Thank you. He been fighting a long time. Long time. Man, Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a lot of history here.
Yes, it is.
History is here. This is monumental. Reverend Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, they lived to see this.
Yes. Wow.
Their fight wasn't in vain.
Wow.
It just didn't happen when they did it, but it happened now.
Amen.
And they're here to see it and be proud of it. It go back to when he did that prayer service. My family is a family that will not back down from prayer.
Yes. Come on.
And I believe because of prayer, We got the verdict we wanted.
Amen. Amen.
We got on our knees. Some of us stood up, but we asked the right person. We asked the right one.
Yes. Come on, God.
We said, God, we need justice. We need it now. And he answered. Oh man, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that my grandmother, my mother, my aunts, they just got to see this history made. I'm grateful my brother's not here. I'm grateful and I'm proud of him. Amen. I will salute him at every day of my life. I will salute him because he showed me how to be strong. He showed me how to be respectful. He showed me how to speak my mind. I'm gonna miss him, but now I know he's in history. Yay. What a day to be a Floyd, man. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrence. Now we will hear from George's baby brother, Rodney Floyd.
You know what, I'm going to say this first. I would like to thank all the advocates, the activists. I'd like to thank the people that stayed in these streets marching night and day. People of Portland stayed in the streets for 83 days, I think, it may be wrong, but thankful for everybody that stayed out there making a statement with us, encouraging us on our dark days, dark nights. We had them. And you know, we got so many messages flooding in from social media sites, can't read them all, it's so many, but you know what? Thank everyone, each and every one. So many people at grocery stores, we walk in, we hear from the elders. You know, I believe in respecting the elders, give you guys all the respect, men and women. And I hear them walk up in the grocery store, stop me, I'm mask up, face, a hat and a mask, and they say, hey, I recognize the side of your face. Let me talk to you, I know who you are. And we have they'll stop and hold a great conversation telling me what they experienced as a child, what they saw, and what they need for change. And they say, we are here for you. And this is everywhere I go, my brother go, we all go. And thank you people for the love in the streets. I'm thanking everyone because we couldn't have did this, and this is a victory for all of us. Yeah. There's no color boundary on this. This is everyone who's been held down, pinned down. Yeah. And you know what, people? And we standing together in unity. And this right here, I'd like to thank our team, Mr. Attorney Ben Crump, Romanucci, the witnesses, Donna Williams. I would like to thank the jury. I mean, everybody. Thank God. That's all day, God Almighty. Thank you. Yeah. And you know what, people? We're not done yet. And my brother George, he's smiling. His beautiful daughter's here. Gianna, baby, you're so beautiful. You're so smart. Roxy, you have my heart, baby. Thank you for holding Gianna, keeping us strong. I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is. We'd like to thank everyone that helped out in this case. Love to thank this jury from having the hearts and mindsets that we all seen in this video, because we know this video was an open and shut case. Everybody knows this video. And know what, the jury had the same mindset we all had. Guilty as charged. I'd like to thank them. I would like to thank, again, everybody, the press and all. But for George, this fight is not over. We're going to stand here together. We're going to try to get this George Floyd Act passed. Yes. The act has to be passed, people. Yes. It has to be. We're going to keep pressure on the Senate. Everybody. Thank y'all all for coming. George, I know that he love all y'all. Thank y'all.
All right, Rodney. And next we're going to have a man who, boy, him and George used to text each other all the time. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee always talk about CUNY Homes, Houston, Texas. Back there, Rox, I think y'all call them Woo. We're going to hear from Brandon Williams, was like a son to George. Woo.
It's a very emotional day for me, and I don't really have the words. I'm overwhelmed with joy, but I do want to start by saying thank you. First off, thank you to all you guys advocating, protesting in the middle of a pandemic, putting your lives and safety on the line. We appreciate that. Especially to our legal team, Ben, Tony, Justin, Chris, Justin back here. Definitely thank you to Keith Ellison and his team. I think they did an amazing job from start to finish. All of the evidence, all of the witnesses, everything proved exactly what we saw in that video. But yet, we still question the decision of the jury, and I wonder why. Oftentimes, this system fails us as black men and women in America. With all evidence there, everything pointing to a guilty verdict, we somehow still don't get the guilty verdict. Or in some cases, I got my good friend Kenny Walker back here.
Yeah.
We don't even get charges.
Yeah. Right.
So today is a pivotal moment for America. It's something this country has needed for a long time now.
Yes.
And hopefully today is the start of that. When I say a pivotal moment, we need change in this broken system. It was built to oppress us. It was built against us. Oftentimes, we see people who are supposed to protect and serve. Supposed to protect and serve. They do the total opposite. On the first day of trial, Rev Sharpton, we had a press conference, and we kneeled for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And when I got up, and it was my turn to speak, I said that every time I come out here, it's hard. Because it's the exact place where they took somebody from me that I love. And I absolutely dislike coming here. But I also said, this time it was easy. We came for one thing and one thing only. That was justice for George Floyd. And today, that's what we got. So this time it wasn't hard at all. It wasn't hard at all. I'm big on faith and prayer.
Yes.
I had a lot of faith, but I was also optimistic. We need police reform bad.
Yeah.
These guys are able to wear a badge and go out in the field, which means that they're qualified and trained to do their job at a high level. But when you shoot and kill a man that's running away from you that doesn't pose a threat, either you're not qualified and undertrained, or it's a choice and you want to kill black men and women. It's either one or the other. And I think today, Keith Ellison and his team proved that just because you are the law, you're not above the law.
Yeah.
We need each and every officer to be held accountable. And until then, it's still scary to be a black man or woman in America encountering police.
Yeah.
So when I say today is a pivotal moment, it's a chance for America to take a turn in the right direction and right a lot of wrongs so that we don't keep adding to these names. So that little girls and boys like Gianna are not growing up fatherless.
Yes, sir.
So their families don't feel the pain we feel. It's a lot of sleepless nights.
Yes.
No family should go through that. And hopefully our country take a turn in the right direction today. And this day in history proves that it was a turning point. Thank you.
Good job, Brandon.
We're going to hear from just a few more family members, and then we'll try to get to your questions. But I'd be remiss because Brandon said I got to acknowledge his man Cliff, who worked for us.
My man Cliff.
and he talked about Kenny Walker. Chris, as we talk about all the brothers, we can never forget that they're killing black women as well. And so we got to remember Breonna Taylor We got to remember Untitled Jefferson. We got to remember Sandra Bland. And we know Tamika Mallory, May 13th, Pam Turner. In a couple of weeks, we're having a march for black women in Baytown, Texas. Because if you was outraged when you saw the video how George Floyd got killed by the police, then you should be equally outraged when you see the video of how they killed Pam Turner, an unarmed black woman laying down on her back that he shot in the face, in the chest, and in the stomach. Justice for George Floyd means freedom for us all, like Falona said, so that's why we're fighting for Pam Turner. With that, we're going to bring up people who come from that Harris County, Texas area, cousins of George Floyd, Sharita McGee and Tara Brown.
Well, first of all, let me just say that my cousins and Wu have pretty much covered everything. There's really not a whole lot left for me to say. I just really want to echo the sentiments of them that when we started this journey almost a year ago, that we were committed to doing a couple of things. One thing is to ensure that justice was served and that we were going to be here and visible and present and actively involved until we saw it through. We are a family who's strong in our faith. We've relied on it in other areas of our life, and this time was no different. And we prayed to God, and we expected our prayers to not come back void, and He delivered for us today. So we are eternally grateful for everyone, from the press to the activists, the attorneys, the prosecution team, everyone. We have so many people that we want to thank that I just really feel like we're probably going to leave somebody out, but I just hope that you would charge it to my head and not my heart, because we sincerely appreciate everything that everybody has done, and we thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. I'm really overwhelmed with emotion, and I just am grateful for this day. It's been a journey, for sure. And this victory for George Floyd today is a victory for many. Mm-hmm. And when we started this journey, kind of like my sister said, we are committed to making sure we know we'll never get George back. And that's the sad part. But we are fighting, and we're going to continue to fight, because we've all individually and together as a family had that conversation that if we could have been there with George on that day, there probably would have been more than one death. Yeah. Okay. But we couldn't be there. So we can't bring him back, but we can save lives. And we want the actual reform that's going to not only give us the change we want, but make sure not another family has to suffer what we've suffered. Thank you all. My sister kind of touched on everything. We have an amazing team here who have helped us along this journey. We are so grateful for everyone who has supported us along the way. We're forever grateful to you, and we love you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. So we're going to hear from two more cousins, and then we're going to hear last from the family, Roxy and Gianna are going to come, and then Reverend Al may have Reverend Jackson and others address you. At this time, we're going to have Angela and Paris come, cousins of George Floyd.
Hello, I'm Angela Harrelson. I'm actually George Floyd's aunt, and this is the cousin here. So anyway, I just want to say that this has been a hard road, not just for me, for the family, but for everybody. And I want to especially thank the Minneapolis community for holding it down at the George Floyd Square. I mean, Janelle Austin, Jeanette Rupert, Maya Washington. These are community leaders that held it down at that place. They kept that place sacred for everyone to go there to express their condolences. And so we appreciate that. And this verdict is a verdict that is well needed and is overdue. And I want to say to the people around the world that is listening, it was a darkness On May 25th was a very, very dark day. There was a lot of pain and there was a lot of hatred. But I want to say at the same time that I got a chance to witness something. I got a chance to witness the love that I saw around the world that was poured to the family. I don't know if I will ever see that again in my lifetime, but I'm glad that I got a chance to see the love that you have shown me, my family, and everyone, because you've touched us. And I want to say thank you, and I'm so glad about this day. Thank you.
I just want to thank everyone again. All the family up here has basically said the same thing, so I just want to thank you. Thank you to the community. You all are very special to me. You're just like family, and I appreciate you at the Square. So I'll leave you with the statement that I always say. You have to keep walking the walk.
Yes.
The journey isn't over. So continue to pray for us, pray for everyone, and keep walking the walk.
Yes. And I want to say one more thing. We must not let his death be his last word. Thank you.
Okay. And lastly, we're going to have Tiffany Hall, a sister-in-law of George Floyd.
I just want to thank everyone for the support. We couldn't do this without you guys, and we appreciate all the time and energy that you guys have put in to help us get this justice. Just know that this is the beginning. We still have a lot of other families we need to fight for, and we hope and pray that this will speak volume and we'll have a change in this world, and we won't have to add any more families with our families. Okay, so we're really hoping that this will bring on a change. Thank you guys, and
thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you guys.
Now we will have Reverend Al come back to the podium and acknowledge some important individuals, and then we'll go ahead and take questions. Reverend Al Sharp.
Let me say this before we have questions. I think that it is appropriate that we respect those that laid the path for us, and let us always remember those that cleared the field and made us possible. Movements didn't start with us. We are continuation of movements before us, and they will be continued until freedom. Amen. May we hear from my mentor, the Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Reverend Al, Ben Trump.
Yes, sir.
Here about a $20 bill. We never saw the $20 bill. Someone who had called the police about $20 bill still operating. So it should be a museum. Where they're profiting from people who come into George Memorial. Brother King once said, it's political, we live in our faith, and prayers, we live under the law. Emmett Till was killed in 1955. Jurors out for an hour. Came back, why was so short? Said, well, we had to get soft drink and smoke a cigarette. That's why it was so short. Well, Rita asked the juror, why did you convict the killer? You know who he was. Brag about it, he protected his wife. He said, I could not imagine going to jail for killing a nigger. That was 55 years, 1955, now it's 2021. Things are changing. Where the Mississippi River started from now. It's time for a fundamental change. I want to thank, when we lost Johnny Cochran, we lost all Johnny Cochran, but God sent Ben Crump. Ben, we thank you so much.
Thank you, Rev.
I do want to say that when the thing first jumped off and Ben was killed, George was killed, Al and I flew and went and met Mr. Freeman, who had the case. He believed it couldn't happen. It never happened before. We urged him to try Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General Keith Ellison. Keith took the case and had the false charge the first day. He had to put together the legal team, tested the jurors. The whole process led by Keith Ellison. The state is 3% African American. Keith Ellison. 1% Samoan, African American congresswoman. It's not closed. Minnesota, state with great proud traditions, Brother Ben.
Yes, sir.
Sons of light, but the struggle is not just about black and white, it's about wrong and right. There must be a massive protest march by white citizens of the state who stand for justice and jobs. This is the state of Hubert Humphrey, who led the struggle for public accommodation in '64. This is the state of McCarthy, the struggle for peace. This is the state of those who fought down through the years. When I think about Omar being the Congress 1% Samoan, and she's the Attorney General state 3% black, there are some people in this state who've been silent too long, must step and speak back, and fight back. It's time for change. I want to express my thanks to all of you who come today, the media who covered this story. And it's not the people on the team of Keith are black and white. And we must learn to live together as brothers and not die apart. So we must learn to live together and not die apart. We will live together. I want to express my thanks to Moriarty, Urban League, and all those who come together today, because we're going to keep marching. Thursday is the funeral for Brother Wright. And we relieved, but we can't celebrate because the killings keep coming. I hope that the case today has broken the backbone of legal lynching. That's what this case should break the backbone of legal lynching. They've lynched us with the law. We're changing that. Thank you very much.
And lastly, before we get to the question, and let me acknowledge again Tamika, my song, Reverend Jamal Bryant, and all of the young people that keep it going. Ain't no sun between these generations. Amen. Anybody think so, get up and work out with me in the morning. National President of the National Urban League, Brother Mark Moriarty.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, I want to be brief, but let me co-sign, amen, and reaffirm all that has been said today. This conviction rests on the courage of a young girl, a young woman who had the audacity to see an injustice and to pick up a 21st century device known as an iPhone and to tape that injustice, that murder taking place on the streets of this city. This conviction rests on the courage of young people, old people, black people, white people, Jews, Gentiles, Protestants, Catholics, Muslims, Hindus, straight, LGBTQ, of all races, creeds, and colors, who last summer, when they saw the tape that this young girl made, the outrage went from Minneapolis all the way across this globe. And this conviction rests on the competence and conviction of an Attorney General named Keith Ellison.
Yes, sir.
Who had the wherewithal to put together a perfect prosecution.
Yes, sir.
And this conviction rests on the steely determination and dignity of the Floyd family.
Right.
The Floyd family, who, withering with the death of their loved ones, stood before cameras, testified before Congress, time and time again. I'll say this: This fight to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act has now stepped to a new level. We call on the United States Senate. We call on who? The United States Senate to forthwith, without delay, without filibuster, to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act and not to water it down. George Floyd, we mourn his loss. May he rest in peace and may he rest in power. But let us understand that this is but a moment, and this battle, this fight, this work for justice must proceed.
As Attorney Crump comes back for your Q&A, let me thank those businessmen that supported early in this. Tyler Perry, that provided transportation, planes for the family and all of us. Robert Smith, the millionaire, billionaire, who gave private planes for us throughout the whole thing. Chuck Phillips, I want to thank all of them. And I want to thank Rachel Nordlinger for helping with communications. And the whole team at National Action Network that back me up and make me think good. And the pride I have, my baby daughter Ashley's with me to make history tonight. And Dominique at home with my grandson. But now you can ask the Attorney General of Black America what you want to ask.
Hey, Reb, do we want to defer to President Biden?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, you all, if you have questions, you can get them to us. I understand that President Biden may be waiting to address the nation, but he wanted to give respect to the family. I do want to acknowledge the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats who are helping push the George Floyd Justice Act. So at this time, if you have questions, you can get with Press at Ben Crump, or Jennifer McGuffin, or Reverend Al. We want to be respectful to the president and let him address what he wants to address. Thank you.
Turn it over to my friend and someone we look to lead on these issues, someone who's been there every step of the way, Mayor Melvin Carter of the great city of St. Paul.
Good evening, I'm Melvin Carter. I'm the mayor of the city of St. Paul, Minnesota, Minnesota's capital city. I have read many times and heard many times over the past several days and weeks that this, Mr. Governor, has been referred to as the trial of the century. And that's crazy when you think about it, because this trial really didn't have that much suspense involved. When we think of great trials, a trial of the century, you don't think of something that is videographed. You don't think of something that had this many witnesses. You don't think of something that in all actuality should have been so clear. And I think part of the frustration, part of the angst that we've seen across the country has been for people who can look in the mirror and say,
well, I hate to interrupt Mayor Melvin Carter of St. Paul, but right now at the White House, both Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden have come out to the podium. So let's listen in to Vice President Kamala Harris live here on NPR News with our apologies for the interruption.
And black men in particular have been treated throughout the course of our history as less than human. Black men are fathers and brothers and sons and uncles and grandfathers and friends and neighbors. Their lives must be valued in our education system, in our healthcare system, in our housing system, in our economic system, in our criminal justice system, in our nation. Full stop. Because of smartphones, so many Americans have now seen the racial injustice that Black Americans have known for generations. The racial injustice that we have fought for generations, that my parents protested in the 1960s, that millions of us Americans of every race protested last summer. Here's the truth about racial injustice. It is not just a Black America problem or a people of color problem. It is a problem for every American. It is keeping us from fulfilling the promise of liberty and justice for all. And it is holding our nation back from realizing our full potential. We are all a part of George Floyd's legacy, and our job now is to honor it and to honor him. Thank you. And now it is my great honor to introduce the President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Today, a jury in Minnesota found former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin guilty on all counts in the murder of George Floyd last May. It was a murder in the full light of day, and it ripped the blinders off for the whole world to see. The systemic racism the Vice President just referred to. The systemic racism is a stain on our nation's soul. The knee on the neck of justice for Black Americans. Profound fear and trauma. The pain, the exhaustion that Black and brown Americans experience every single day. The murder of George Floyd launched a summer of protest we hadn't seen since the civil rights era in the 60s. Protests that unified people of every race and generation in peace and with purpose to say enough, enough, enough of this senseless killings. Today's verdict is a step forward. I just spoke with the governor of Minnesota, who thanked me for the close work with his team. I also spoke with George Floyd's family again. A remarkable family of extraordinary courage. Nothing can ever bring their brother, their father back. But this can be a giant step forward in the march toward justice in America. Let's also be clear that such a verdict is also much too rare. For so many people, it seems like it took a unique and extraordinary convergence of factors. A brave young woman with a smartphone camera, a crowd that was traumatized witnesses, a murder that lasts almost 10 minutes in broad daylight for ultimately the whole world to see. Officers standing up and testifying against a fellow officer instead of just closing ranks, which should be commended. A jury who heard the evidence, carried out their civic duty in the midst of an extraordinary moment, under extraordinary pressure. For so many, it feels like it took all of that for the judicial system to deliver a just basic accountability. We saw how traumatic and exhausting just watching the trial was for so many people. Think about it, those of you who are listening. Think about how traumatic it was for you. You weren't there. You didn't know any of the people. But it was difficult, especially for the witnesses who had to relive that day. It's a trauma. On top of the fear so many people of color live with every day when they go to sleep at night and pray for the safety of themselves and their loved ones. Again, as we saw in this trial from the fellow police officers who testified, most men and women who wear the badge serve their communities honorably. But those few who fail to meet that standard must be held accountable, and they were today. One was. No one should be above the law. And today's verdict sends that message. But it's not enough. We can't stop here. In order to deliver real change and reform, we can and we must do more to reduce the likelihood that tragedies like this will ever happen and occur again. To ensure that black and brown people, or anyone, so they don't fear the interactions with law enforcement, that they don't have to wake up knowing that they can lose their very life in the course of just living their life. They don't have to worry about whether their sons or daughters will come home after a grocery store run, or just walking down the street, or driving their car, or playing in the park, or just sleeping at home. And this takes acknowledging and confronting head-on systemic racism and the racial disparities that exist in policing and in our criminal justice system more broadly. You know, state and local government and law enforcement needs to step up, but so does the federal government. That's why I've appointed the leadership of the Justice Department that I have, that is fully committed to restoring trust between law enforcement and the community they are sworn to serve and protect. I have complete confidence in the Attorney General, General Garland's leadership and commitment. I've also nominated two key Justice Department nominees, Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clark, who are eminently qualified, highly respected lawyers who have spent their entire careers fighting to advance racial equity and justice. Vanita and Kristen have the experience and the skill necessary to advance our administration's priorities to root out unconstitutional policing and reform our criminal justice system, and they deserve to be confirmed. We also need Congress to act. George Floyd was murdered almost a year ago. There's meaningful police reform legislation in his name. You just heard the Vice President speak of it. She helped write it. Legislation to tackle systemic misconduct in police departments, to restore trust between law enforcement and the people they're entrusted to serve and protect. But it shouldn't take a whole year to get this done. In my conversations with the Floyd family, I spoke with them again today, I assure them we're going to continue to fight for the passage of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act so I can sign into law as quickly as possible. There's more to do. Finally, it's the work we do every day to change hearts and minds as well as laws and policies. That's the work we have to do. Only then will full justice and full equality be delivered to all Americans. And that's what I just discussed with the Floyd family. The guilty verdict does not bring back George. But through the family's pain, they're finding purpose. So George's legacy will not be just about his death, but about what we must do in his memory. I also spoke to Gianna, George's young daughter, again. When I met her last year, I've said this before, at George's funeral, I told her how brave I thought she was. And I sort of knelt down to hold her hand. I said, Daddy's looking down on you. He's so proud. She said to me then, I'll never forget it, Daddy changed the world. And I told her this afternoon, Daddy did change the world. Let that be his legacy. A legacy of peace, not violence, of justice. Peaceful expression of that legacy are inevitable and appropriate, but violent protest is not. And there are those who will seek to exploit the raw emotions of the moment, agitators and extremists who have no interest in social justice, who seek to carry out violence, destroy property, fan the flames of hate and division, who will do everything in their power to stop this country's march toward racial justice. We can't let them succeed. This is a time for this country to come together, to unite as Americans, There can never be any safe harbor for hate in America. I've said it many times. The battle for soul of this nation has been a constant push and pull for more than 240 years. A tug of war between the American ideal that we're all created equal and the harsh reality that racism has long torn us apart. At our best, the American ideal wins out. So we can't leave this moment or look away thinking our work is done. We have to look at it, we have to look as we did for those 9 minutes and 29 seconds. We have to listen. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Those are George Floyd's last words. We can't let those words die with him. We have to keep hearing those words. We must not turn away. We can't turn away. We have a chance to begin to change the trajectory in this country. It's my hope and prayer that we live up to the legacy. May God bless you, but may God bless George Floyd and his family. Thank you for taking the time to be here. This can be a moment of significant change. Thank you.
President Joe Biden, and we also heard from Vice President Kamala Harris before, talking about today's verdict in the the Derek Chauvin trial, but he was convicted of murder, second degree, third degree, and manslaughter in the killing of George Floyd. And because President Biden there referred so much to George Floyd and his family, speaking to them earlier, talking to his daughter Gianna, he said, it's time to unite as Americans. There should be no safe harbor for hate. He said the conviction of Chauvin and the death of George Floyd can be a giant step forward for the nation against systemic racism. He said today's verdict proves accountability and that no one should be above the law. And that's President Joe Biden speaking just moments ago, along with Vice President Kamala Harris. You heard it live here on NPR News as we continue our special coverage for you. Just a reminder that coming up here at 7 o'clock, we will have a chance for you to get involved in the discussion. Your reaction to the verdict. Kerry Miller will be taking your calls tonight, a special call-in program focusing on the verdict and how it's touching the lives of all of us here in Minnesota. That begins at 7 here on NPR News. Well, thanks for joining us. We are following reaction to the conviction of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. The jury found Chauvin guilty on all counts: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Chauvin is the second police officer in Minnesota to be convicted of killing a civilian while on duty. He is the first officer in the state to be held criminally liable in the killing of a black person. Shortly after the verdict was read, Chauvin was handcuffed and led out of the courtroom. That was just after 4 p.m. And that is the sound of the immediate joyful reaction in the streets of downtown Minneapolis outside the Hennepin County Government Center. Cheers also erupted at the intersection of 38th and Chicago, where George Floyd was killed last spring. And I understand our photographer, Evan Frost, is there now at George Floyd Square. We've been checking in on reaction, crowd gathering. And Evan Frost, can you hear me?
Yeah, good evening, Tom.
Good evening. Good to speak with you. Tell us, what's the scene like there at George Floyd Square? I hear that it sounds like people are giving speeches in the background.
Oh, yeah, there are people giving speeches. There's a brass band. There's free food. This is actually the most people I've seen at the square since the days following George Floyd's death.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of celebration here. I see people giving a lot of hugs and just kind of hanging out.
And what are the people you're talking to saying about today's verdict? What kinds of reactions are you hearing?
Well, I got here pretty recently, so I haven't had a chance to speak with too many people.
Yeah.
But people are generally just happy, relieved, and I think so many people spend time thinking about all the other ways that this could go and not really considering this outcome. So I think people are just grateful to be here and happy to just kind of enjoy being around each other, and the sun's out too. So.
Yeah. And tell us, remind us again of what that location, you have spent a fair amount of time there over the past year, what that location has become for people, for neighbors, and for the community.
Well, it's really become a living memorial. I mean, there are people who are here every single day, have morning meetings, evening meetings, come have meals here. It's really become kind of a community around this memorial.
Right.
It's been a site where people can gather, can grieve, and now can celebrate, have a bit of relief for a bit.
Evan Frost at George Floyd Square, 38th in Chicago and Minneapolis. Thanks so much for taking the time. We are going to go now to Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry, who is giving a news conference. So let's listen in live here on NPR News.
For generations and generations. We are a city that is going to make that change. We are a city that is hopefully an example for the rest of the world to follow. I want to thank George Floyd's family. Can't imagine the grief that they have been going through over these last 11 months and continue to go through right now. A daughter who's lost a father, family who's lost a son and uncle. That pain will forever be there, and it is a family that will forever be rendered incomplete regardless of the verdict that just came forward. This is a good day in Minneapolis. It is a good day in Minnesota, but let me be exceedingly clear. This is day one. This is day one. We've gone through 400 years of injustice, intentional discrimination, Jim Crow restrictive covenants that run with the land, and all forms of anti-blackness and structural racism that has impeded our black community. Now is the time for that change. Generation after generation, this measure of basic justice through our judicial system has been denied to our black community. That there will in fact be black residents in our city, in our state, in our nation that are stunned, in fact suspended in disbelief that the jury actually delivered this moment. Well, that reality in and of itself speaks volume for where we are. The trauma our city has faced, the trauma our nation has faced. The pain over this last year, for some we've seen drop by drop, a slow, steady, and unrelenting uncertainty. And for so many, it's been incalculable loss and solitude. For our black neighbors in particular. I know that the effects have been in so many ways torrential. The floodgates of 400 years worth of injustice hitting an entire community like a tidal wave. There's no playbook for navigating these difficult times. No personal discipline or good intention that will somehow blunt this impact. Justice has been rendered in this case, but we still have a long way to go to achieve true justice in our city and in our country. No matter your path to this moment in time, one thing is certain, and that is no resident in our city has been immune from the grip of grief over these last 11 months. I mentioned a minute ago that we've been defined as a city on the edge. But it is that precipice of change that we aim to define ourselves by going into the future. We're building a new and inclusive community as we speak. We're piloting new ways of policing. We're working towards alternative responses to safety beyond policing. And of course, we're working alongside our Chief Arredondo. We are a city that is capable of extraordinary progress. And what makes our democracy work, and what will make our community stronger, and what will ultimately inform our ability to honor George Floyd's life in both word and deed will be our collective willingness to have that active participation in shaping our future, to make sure that the precision of our actions match the precision of the harm that was initially inflicted. Now is our time in this city. Yes, there will be challenges, and I know we will meet them together with a shared sense of purpose and abiding commitment to racial justice and an unmatched love for the city of Minneapolis. I want to take just a brief moment to, yes, again, thank the family of George Floyd. I want to thank the jurors, the witnesses, many of whom were city employees. I want to thank every single staff member that has worked so tirelessly for the city of Minneapolis over these last 11 months. It's a difficult state to be operating in some form of crisis for that period of time, and they have done it. They have risen to that challenge. I want to thank our community. Our community has stepped forward to hold us accountable. Our community has charged us with rising to see the magnitude of this moment, and I'm hopeful that we will indeed meet that moment together. Council Vice President Jenkins and Council Member Alondra Cano have joined us. They are council members that share the intersection through which George Floyd was murdered, at which George Floyd was murdered. And I would like to invite up Council Vice President Jenkins right now, who has been a champion in every way, shape, and form of the progress that we all need to see. Council Vice President.
Thank you, Mayor Fry. Good evening, everyone. Let me just start out with a little quote. It says, "If I am a criminal for advocating that people have the rights to defend themselves and to fight for what they deserve, then I hope that I am always known as a criminal." That was spoken by Robert F. Williams, the president of the NAACP in Monroe, North Carolina in 1954. My name is Andrea Jenkins, and I'm the Vice President of the Minneapolis City Council. I first want to just once again extend my heart and my hand to the family, to the friends, to the loved ones of George Perry Floyd Jr. Their anguish, their pain, their anger will not go away with this guilty verdict in this trial. Nothing will bring back their father, their brother, their uncle, their nephew, their cousin, or their friend. And I also want to just publicly express my condolences to the Wright family for the loss of their son, their father, nephew, cousin, Dante Wright. So much agony, so much pain in this community right now. But today, this verdict is about the humanity of black people. It's a step towards justice. It's a step towards equality. It's about accountability. And it has illuminated the inequities in our public safety system in this country, the inequities that our black citizens have been talking about for a very, very, very long time. Yesterday I heard
Minneapolis council member and vice president of the city council, Andrea Jenkins, speaking at a news conference. We also heard from Mayor Fry. You'll recall we spoke with Andrea Jenkins
racism,
earlier this afternoon as well to get her reaction.
COVID-19. White supremacy is at the very core of this country's founding. It's in the soil, it's in the water, it's in the very air that we breathe. But today Today, justice was served. Police accountability was handed out. It gives us a little more hope. Hope that has carried black people through the darkness and despair that COVID-19 has wrought. Hope to keep fighting for justice, to keep struggling for fairness and equality. Hope that coalition building has new momentum. Hope that intersectionality becomes more than a buzzword, but a way of life. It is only through coalition building that we will once and for all end racism in this community and in this country. I want to thank those brave witnesses, my constituents who cried to the entire world and represented the pain and the anguish that every single black American in this country is feeling. They made sure that they would hold Derek Chauvin accountable for his criminal actions. To my community, I love you. Earlier today, I did an interview and I was asked, what do I think George Floyd Square, the intersection of 38th and Chicago, means to Minneapolis? And I just want to say, I've been literally toiling at 38th and Chicago for well over 2 decades. I have long coined the intersection of 38th and Chicago the soul of this city. I think I can rightfully say that right now, it is the soul of this nation. And so, let's begin to rebuild our community in and around 38th and Chicago. Let's make it a beacon of social justice known to all throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President, for those powerful words. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are all joined by Councilmember Lene Palmisano as well. Councilmember Alondra Cano from the 9th Ward, who also borders the intersection at George Floyd Square. Councilmember.
It's been a long and hard year for Minneapolis. My name is Alondra Cano and I represent the 9th Ward. Together with Councilmember Jenkins and Mayor Fry, we have been working extremely hard to support the communities that have been holding this moment for such a long time. There has been collective loss and grief in our city. There has been collective love and care for the people most impacted in this moment. And I deeply believe that we needed the answers that we heard today from the jury. We needed this glimmer of hope. We needed this sliver of justice. I believe that our pain as a community, and the pain specifically that has been happening and inflicted upon the African American community today, has been deeply acknowledged. That humanity has been deeply affirmed. And that struggle for justice has been completely expanded and shared throughout our country. I think together, as elected leaders, as community members, as parents, as people of Minneapolis, we are standing here to say that we are committed to not losing one more life under these circumstances. For me, this moment right now is about gratitude to every single person that has stepped up and into this moment. Tonight is about kindness. Do something kind to yourself, to your family, with your community. And tomorrow, as we think about Dante Wright in Brooklyn Center and Adam Toledo in Illinois, we open up our hearts to continue to walk down this path of justice, to hold hands together and meet these moments as a community. So thank you, Minneapolis. Thank you to the jury.
Thank you, Council Member, for your strength and leadership. And with that, we will open it to questions. So the question from Liz Navratil was whether each of us can describe where we were when we learned of the verdict and how we felt. You know, I'll take you a little bit further back, 11 months, to when I first watched the video itself. It was clear to me in the immediacy that we needed to see accountability. It was clear to me that the normal framework that's baked into the mortar of City Hall, the principles and procedures that tell you not to say anything or not to speak out, this was very different. It was also clear to me on that long walk over the Central Avenue Bridge that we as a city, as a collective, really needed to change. Fast forward 11 months, and I was standing in my office, the conference room at City Hall, with a number of our staff. You know, to say that there was a sense of relief, it would be a dramatic understatement. You know, we all wanted to see justice. We all wanted to make sure that, again, this was day one of the necessary change that we needed to see. And I think we all were nervous that what has happened on so many occasions through our judicial system where we wouldn't see that justice would happen again. I'm so thankful to those that were involved in the court system and the jurors, especially the witnesses. And I'm thankful to Attorney General Keith Ellison, who presented an extraordinary case on behalf of the prosecution. Council Vice President, Councilmember Cano, Palmisano.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Liz. I was ironically doing a class visit with a group of law students at Hamlin-Mitchell University Law School. And it was a class, the first time that this class has been offered at the law school. It's a class on transgender law and policy. And so I was talking to these third-year law school students about issues, the attacks, the vicious attacks on transgender youth all around our country, including right here in the state of Minnesota, criminalizing people's identities, criminalizing people's rights to just basic human access, the bathrooms, schools, education, employment, housing, etc. And the little Star Tribune alert news splash popped up on the screen. And I was in the middle of an answer to one of their questions and just became speechless. You know, I talked about a lot about what I think this verdict means, but you know, I think there was a sigh of relief, particularly, you know, when the judge first announced the verdict of the first count, second-degree murder. You know, I was like, okay, maybe this is going to be the end of it. And, you know, in many people's eyes, I think that would have represented some modicum of justice. And, you know, and in Minnesota, quite frankly, those are some of the kinds of results that people of color continuously see, little bits of justice, little crumbs. And so when I heard the second count, though, I was pretty excited. And then all counts, I mean, that is what the protesters have been out in the streets demanding. That is what people all over the world has been demanding. I got a lot of questions in the last couple of days about the comments of Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and that's what she was demanding, guilty on all three counts. And so that's where I was. I don't know, Councilmember Cano, you want to comment?
Mr. Mayor, this is kind of an open-ended question here, but what's next for the city here? And what's next for the intersection of 38th and Chicago here?
I'll take each question here in turn. The question is what's next for the city, and also what's next for the intersection at 38th and Chicago. The intersection of 38th and Chicago indeed has multiple truths associated with it. As was being displayed for the last several hours, it is a critical and important location of racial justice and healing. It has been a very important location for which community can gather, both before as well as during this trial. And going forward on a permanent basis, we believe strongly that this should be both a permanent memorial to George Floyd, everything that he stood for in his life, but also a intersection where racial healing and justice is front and center in both the way the buildings and the infrastructure are set up, but also in the way that it allows for humanity to gather. Now, that is absolutely true. It's also true that this will and has been a very important transportation line planned for quite some time through our bus rapid transit system in the form of the D line. It is also true that neighbors surrounding that intersection have been subjected to far too much crime and violence over these last 7-8 months. The violence has been unacceptable. Everyone should have the ability to use their sidewalk, to have their kids play outside, free from, you know, in a safe atmosphere. And so, you know, moving forward, as the chief has mentioned, there will be a reopening of the intersection, but it is not a going back to normal. We're going to make sure that we have a bump out, a location for the memorial itself. We're going to make sure that we're doing everything possible to incentivize and encourage black ownership in that corridor itself through a combination of our commercial property development fund, which allows for patient capital so that our black community can own not just the businesses but some of the underlying real estate. As you know, we've also had some assistance that have gone out to several of the businesses that have been impacted over the last several months in the form of grants or forgivable loans. As for what's next for the city, transformation. Deep-seated change. Change in the way our police department operates, change in the way our economy functions to make sure that our black community is centered not just at the table but also as key beneficiaries of the work. And progress that needs to continue in the area of housing, which has always been a passion of mine. We could get into all of the specifics, and the specifics, believe me, are necessary right now. But we have a lot of change that will be coming down the pike.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
Operation Safety Net, could you like to comment on how that went, and when might Minneapolis be opening up, pulling down some of the boarding downtown?
The question was about Operation Safety Net in general, and also with regard to some of the infrastructure that has been put up, some of the fencing around some of our key pieces of city infrastructure, notably City Hall, Hennepin County Government Center, some of our police precincts. I'll note that one of the big differences, there are many differences between last summer in late May and early June and right now. One of the biggest differences in terms of planning has been time. We've had time to prepare. Prepare in the way of establishing formalized agreements with our community members, and we have done so, making sure that we have 7 new contracts going out right now that are working at this moment with 7 different community organizations that are charged with both disseminating key information from the city as well as relaying us key intelligence as the nights and the days ahead progress. We've made sure to establish formalized agreements with neighborhood associations, block captains, neighborhood leaders, recognizing that there are moments when the best person to deliver the message doesn't necessarily work directly for the city and isn't necessarily myself. So making sure to empower those community voices has been a really critical component over these last several months. Indeed, there's also, through Operation Safety Net, been an increased presence in law enforcement, State Patrol, National Guard, and a number of our different mutual aid jurisdictions, and including our police. And we are appreciative of the assistance that has been provided throughout our city. And I fully recognize that to some there is a great level of discomfort due to the presence of law enforcement, and simultaneously, we need to keep our city safe. Both of those two things are true. As to the question of when will Operation Safety Net end, I imagine that it will be soon. I can't give you an exact number of days at this point, but I know we'll be in collaboration with a number of the different jurisdictions that are involved in Operation Safety Net itself. And I'll also note that Chief Arredondo, in fact, intended to be here, but the press conference itself got pushed back due to a number of different media reasons, and he's with the command staff as we speak.
Or how to change it?
The question from Ms. Navratil was, how does this verdict impact the question of change in this police department, or whether to
Replace it with a public safety department, because some people want to get rid of MPD, some want to just change it. How does this verdict impact those conversations?
For my own purposes, speaking for myself, change has been long overdue regardless of the outcome of this verdict. Indeed, it's justice today, but we need to see justice tomorrow, and justice on Thursday, and justice on Friday, and continued. And we strongly believe that a big part of that is deep structural change in the way that our police department operates. And there are, of course, always differences of opinion as to what exactly that transformation, reform, whatever you want to call it, looks like. But Chief Arredondo and I have issued a litany of changes to our policy, everything from overhauling our use of force policy to banning no-knock warrants in all but exigent circumstances, embedding a city attorney in the process to ensure that disciplinary practices are expedited as quickly as possible, and making sure that de-escalation is centered in everything we do, including the reporting structure itself. Now, those are just a few examples, and our office, along with council members with me here today, council members that are not here, have also worked very hard towards safety beyond policing, noting that not every instance needs a response from an officer with a gun. Whether that's social workers or mental health responders, we all believe that those are very important components of the work ahead. And we also need police. We need law enforcement. Both of those things are true. And so as for the work ahead, that's been my position all along. It'll continue to be my position right now going forward.
Mayor, of course. So obviously we have this major verdict here in Minneapolis this week, but 2 days from now we also have another funeral in Minneapolis this very same week. So do you have any thoughts on these two pivotal things happening pretty much at once in our community?
Thank you. I believe that's Ms. Raditz.
Jokic.
Oh,
With KSTP. That's okay.
Ms. Jokic's question was how these multiple different officer-involved killings have impacted the city and ultimately where we're going from here, given that the funeral of Dante Wright is coming very shortly. What happens in Brooklyn Center impacts Minneapolis. What happens in Minneapolis impacts Brooklyn Center, and we hope that what happens here in our state has a significant impact on the rest of the globe. I mean, the words that have been said, be they in churches, mosques, barbershops, or classrooms the world over, they've had an impact on so many people throughout our country, perhaps more than anyone could have expected. In so many instances, this has been a centuries-in-the-making reckoning around racial justice, and the incidents that happen, whether in Chicago or here, we should feel them quite acutely, and we know that they're especially felt and acutely by our communities of color. Yep. So the question is whether there is a curfew tonight. There is not presently a curfew that has been issued, although that certainly remains an option on the table if necessary. That is not the desired approach, but it is an option that will be available if need be. Thank you, everybody.
Guilty verdict and questions that you have about the future. We'll talk about police reform as well tomorrow at 11 a.m.
All right, we look forward to that. Angela Davis, thank you very much and have a great evening.
Thank you, Tom.
And stay tuned here. Earlier, President Biden said about the guilty verdicts today, no one should be above the law, and today's verdict sends that message, but it's not enough. He said it was a step forward. We also heard from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, who said it is a good day in Minneapolis. But this is day one. We heard from Vice President Harris, who urged passage of the federal George Floyd Police Accountability Bill in the U.S. Senate. I'm Tom Cran. This is NPR News. 91.1 KNOW, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Member-supported public radio. Thanks for being with us for the live coverage today. Know that we have a lot more always online about this big story. Derek Chauvin, guilty of murder and manslaughter in George Floyd's killing. It's right there across the page. We've got what we know about the jurors. We've got the Floyd family reaction to the guilty verdict. And President Biden speaking to the Floyd family as well. That's online now. mprnews.org. Well, we're still 40 degrees, and we've still got a bit of sunshine as we round the curve here to 7 p.m. in the north. 30% chance of rain showers this evening, then mostly clear after midnight, low into the upper 20s. Partly cloudy.